All right, shall we start?
Yeah, sounds good. Let me stop the nice volume.
I like the music.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I keep it or? Nah, I think it's
Maybe
okay.
a little bit quieter. But I like it.
Okay. Something like
Awesome.
this. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CHI 2020.
Hello.
Hello. This is the second day and also last day of our conference. So there's a two-paper session today, followed by an interactivity session, which will be lightning talks. So today, so there will be Zoom, and we encourage you to ask questions for every after each talk. So session chair will be pick your questions if you post your question on Zoom, or you can also use Zoom feature raising hand. So and session chair gonna keep an eye on those chat. And after talk, please unmute yourself and ask your question to the speaker directly. There's also YouTube Live if you guys prefer the channel, but you can only ask questions via Zoom. And also, it would be nice if you guys can like publicize about these events using hashtag CambridgeCHI. So with that, I will. Oh, and also this is our schedule just to recap. All right. So yeah, we'll move on to the full paper session. So I will hand it over to our session chair, Alvin. Hey, Alvin.
Hey, thanks a lot, Soya. And great work to you, Ken, and Elena for putting this together. I think it's a really great idea.
Yeah, thanks for the help.
5 minutes to actually wait. Our schedule says
until we.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, let's start
so
at 11.
I can turn up the music so people enjoy the Hawaiian taste. But yeah, let's start at 11, and then hopefully there'll be more participants joining.
I think it's time to start. So, all right, so we're going to start our first paper session, and I will hand it over to our session chair, Alvin.
Great, thanks, Soya. Super exciting that we're doing this. I love that there are 30 people on this Zoom and I think another 20 or so on the YouTube live stream. So welcome to CambridgeCHI, everybody. Our first talk in this visualization session is by Min Lu, who is presenting on behalf of this fantastically international group of researchers who've been exploring visual information flows and infographics. So we should have plenty of time for question and answers. So please speak up either in the text chat or by raising your hand in the participants panel in Zoom.
Hi, I'm Min Lu from Shenzhen University in China. I'm very happy to have the chance to present our work in CambridgeCHI. Thank my collaborators for their fantastic efforts in this project. Chufeng, Cherry, Joel, Hans-Peter, Danny, and Hui. Infographics are very eye-catching graphical designs. By blending graphics and information, infographics are usually designed to present information clearly and more quickly. In well-designed infographics, we always know how to trace the data elements and get the story. For example, here, I believe most of us will go through those elements like this way. This semantic structure that leads us, help us to link the elements and finally get the story is visual information flow. Although infographics can be very diversely designed, some of them do have very similar flows. For example, these two here are with the zigzag flows, and these two, their information goes up and down from left to right. Intrigued by those observations, in this work, our goal is to explore the design patterns of visual information flow in infographics, to have a better understanding of graphic designs and more generally, visual organization of storytelling. To do that, we collect a large amount of infographics from two designer websites, FreePic and Shutterstock, by searching with the keywords infographics. The infographics that we collected are more design patterns. As the example shows here, these templates are with well-designed elements. For example, texts are designed with similar font size and styles. Icons are consistently designed. On the other hand, those templates are very diverse in designs. That is, they provide a reasonably good coverage of the design space in infographics. Now let's consider a general infographics. Designers usually create an infographics by composing multiple layers, such as layers to draw information, layers to create a shading effects. But basically, an infographics can be decomposed into two layers. The layer of artistical decorations to make it more visual appealing, and the other layer of data elements where the information really flows. So in our method, it composed of two parts. The first part is to peel off those artistical decoration and get the data elements. And then with those data elements, we construct visual information flow. So in the first part, our input is the original infographics. We leverage the power of neural network and specifically we adopt YOLO, an advanced object detection model, and train it from scratch with our own infographics dataset and make it to able to detect those data elements. So in the output, each data is categorized by a tag and also a boundary box shows where it is. Here shows a simple interface that we developed to manually label those data. Data elements are categorized into 7 groups, and for each group, we also further distinguish into subgroups. For example, numbers, we have 10 subcategories from 0 to 9. So using this interface, we manually labeled over 4,000 infographics. Then we performed image augmentation, including we generate the gray version of the infographic, so we double the scale of the dataset, and we also cropping to generate subgraphs. So in the end, we get 23,000 training dataset. With this large number of training dataset, we can make our network work. So here shows some successful detection results of our method. The average precision of our model is around 63%. It's not very high precise, but it's reasonable good. There do have some missing detected cases, and I will introduce how we deal with it in the visual information flow construction part. But now, let's look at the detection result. When we see this, actually we can have a good guess of the flow. It probably goes like this. And yes, this is the original infographics. Now let's elaborate this problem further. Is there any strange in these infographics? Yes, we may notice there is something missing here. Actually, when we read these infographics, we do some mental work unconsciously. We compose visual elements which depict the same piece of information into groups. Like here, icons, texts, and the number of years are composed as visual groups. And we can easily get those visual groups because designers has already adopted some design principles, that is the gesture principles, in their design. For example, they use the proximity principle to make elements in a group close to each other, so we won't detect this icon is with the same group as those texts. And second principle is similarity principle, that groups are always configured with similar configurations. Here, each group has an icon, text, and a number, and that's why we see there is something strange when the text is missing in this group. And another is regularity principle, that is, groups are always placed in a harmonious patterns. For example, designers would avoid long jump as much as possible to make users easily track those groups. So with those principles, the basic idea in VRF construction is we first take those detected elements as input, then we construct the backbone, and then we associate those elements in a group. We develop a rule-based algorithm. The key idea is to score all possible tracing of those elements, we choose the best one. Here shows some examples. As I mentioned before, because our neural network cannot detect all the data elements, so in some cases, those elements can be misdetected. So in our algorithm, we can infer those elements by the similarity of groups. So we can recover them, some of them. Here shows more example. The gray dashed rectangles are those elements inferred. Now we get the visual information flow by a backbone and a group associating links. So to explore the design space, we transform the visual information flow to a visual information signature. The signature is a image page 100 by 100 size. And in this image, we draw those backbones with figure strokes. And then we draw those group links with thinner strokes to make it a secondary feature. So by this transformation, each infographics is transformed to a 10,000 high dimension data. Then we apply the TSD projection to see it in 2D space. On the right, I shows a close-up of the region highlighted in left, and we can see on the top part, the VIF are more W shape, and here are more spiral, and here are more like a vertical line. So in this space, we perform the semi-automatic clustering to get the VIF patterns. And we get 6 main patterns as shown here, including landscape, portrait, clock, etc. And also another 6 less notable patterns. This is the dynamic navigation in this projection. Taking VIF as a high-level feature of infographics, it also supports us to query those infographics. We develop a prototype to show this idea. To draw a conclusion, in this work, we explore visual information flow in a broad range of infographics. By utilizing a mixed method of deep learning and a gesture rule-based construction method, we distill 12 main VIF design patterns, and also we discussed the taxonomy with 2 dimensions in our paper, but I didn't cover in my presentation. If you are interested, you can look into our paper, and we developed infographics searching engine. Also, we release our data in the public. You can visit this website if you are interested in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Min Lu, for that wonderful piece of work and a wonderful presentation of it as well. So Min Lu is here in the Zoom with us. So do folks have questions? Please leave them either in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Yes, I see one hand raised from Yalong Yang.
Yes, thanks for the nice talk. So I have a question like, have you ever considered using eye tracking to verify your information flow? Because maybe eye tracking can be a very good validation of whether people is looking at the information flow you proposed. Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks, Avi. Thank Yalong for your wonderful question. Actually, now we consider construct the VIF from the designer side, that we infer the graphical elements from the infographics, but we haven't touched the end of user. That, as you said, we maybe in next project we can use eye tracking equipment to track the user's eye movement, so we can really know whether they follow the information flows or not. So it will be very interesting to explore in that direction. Yeah.
Any other questions for Min Lu? I have one, actually. I'm curious if you noticed patterns in terms of sort of either the domains in which certain types of visual information flows were used, or whether they corresponded to certain types of narratives that people wanted to tell, or things like that.
Yeah, actually, in our data set, the data set we collected are from designer website. So in that data set, we distilled 12 main patterns, and we found the clock and spiral shape as the most used patterns. But in our paper, we also try to collect some data from in the wild. So we collect a small data set from Google Image. Then we found that in the reality, designers are more like to use the portrait shape, such as spiral or vertical lines, maybe because it fits more to the paper sheet, the size of the paper sheet. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
we
makes a
have
ton
a
of sense.
histogram. Yeah.
Great. So unfortunately, we're out of time for that paper, but please join me in using reactions on Zoom to thank Min Lu for that wonderful piece of work. Next up, we have Cherry Zhao, who will be presenting on behalf of folks at the City University of Hong Kong, Harvard, and Adobe Research on Iconate, automatic compound icon generation and ideation.
Hi, thank you for your interest of this work. I'm Nanshan Zhao from City University of Hong Kong, and today I'm going to present Iconate, a tool for automatic compound icon generation and ideation. Icons, as a universal language, appear everywhere in our daily lives. They are one of the most simple and efficient ways to convey a message. To transmit complex information, an icon is often composed of simpler sub-icons, corresponding to basic, easily recognizable concepts. For example, the icon for business contract is composed of a $sign for business, lock for security, and clipboard for contract. The icon for flight tickets is composed of an airplane and tickets. However, creating effective compound icons is a challenging task, since a well-designed icon should be both understandable and aesthetically pleasing. It involves considerations of how to represent each sub-icons, how to lay them out, and how to arrive at a cohesive design. Novices can get overwhelmed by hundreds of options. Even for professionals, they often turn to diverse resources and create many iterations before coming up with a final icon. In this work, our goal is to provide intelligent design support for creating compound icons given input compound concepts, such as flight ticket or baby care, while facilitating rapid exploration and ideation. Before going to details of our work, I would like to thank for the non-project. All of the icons of our project are downloaded from it. To gain insights from existing icon design process, we conducted semi-structured interviews with professional designers. To mimic the professional design process, we introduced Iconate, a novel system to support compound icon design. The core idea behind the system lies in our 3S icon design framework. We interviewed with 3 professional designers. The first person is a senior product designer with 9 years of experience. The second person is a senior experienced designer with 11 years of experience. And the last one is a user experience designer with 7 years of experience. Each interview conducted via video call lasted around 45 minutes. Each participant was paid $75 and completed a semi-structured interview, which probed the designer's workflow, motivations, tools, and so on, concluded with a step-by-step walkthrough of a recent icon design project of theirs. Here are some of the feedbacks from designers. They said,
"We remix, look and get inspirations from different metaphors and bring them together to create a new metaphor."
If a metaphor comes up many times, it may indicate that it works for people. Making something new rarely happens. Existing icons are frequently repurposed.
In summary, there are 3 main lessons from the interviews. Lesson 1, compound icons are common. To create a compound icon, designers begin by brainstorming a set of associated basic concepts to compose together. Lesson 2, designers turn to existing icon repositories to get a sense of how various concepts have typically been visually represented in the past. Simpler icons corresponding to basic, easily recognizable concepts are remixed together. Lesson 3. A few variants are created after several iterations, and the final selections are made based on mainly 3 factors: semantics, style, and space. Based on the lessons from the expert interviews, we developed the 3S framework, a fundamental guideline for building tools to support the icon design process. 3 key design considerations are semantics, style, and space, which can be tackled separately. The semantics of an icon are the set of visual metaphors. Finding correct visual metaphors is challenging because an icon may not represent a direct translation of the visual object itself. For example, a hand icon may represent protection or insurance rather than the physical body part. A design tool should support users in mapping abstract concepts to visual metaphors, such as mapping secure to a lock or shield. Icon style can span a spectrum from abstract to realistic representations and can vary in low-level features, such as stroke or fill tabs. An icon is rarely used alone, but appears together among other icons. As a result, it becomes crucial to maintain style consistency. A design tool should support generating style-compatible icons. For space, rather than only considering about design principles such as symmetry and alignment in other graphic designs, the relative positions of visual elements with a compound icon can convey a meaning. For instance, a hand positioned below a house can indicate house insurance, while a different arrangement may have an alternative meaning or lack thereof. Thus, a design tool should provide scaffolding for layout decisions based on both spatial semantics and conventional design principles. We design our Iconate system based on the 3S framework. The Iconate interface has 3 main components: a search interface for ideating for semantically meaningful icon candidates, a canvas for customizing and refining the style and space of the resulting icons, a bookmarking for capturing design variations, following professional workflows and the principle of iterative design. Here is a video demo. To enable our computational pipeline, we introduced the following datasets. Our first step was to find a manageable but comprehensive set of concepts building blocks, such as house, umbrella, and person, that can be recombined to form a large diversity of compound icons. To do this, we turned to multiple sources, including psycholinguistic studies and existing icon repositories for help. Finally, we got 152 concepts. To enable the pipeline to assemble constituent icons together, we reuse design knowledge of existing icons. Towards this purpose, we manually curated a set of compound concepts and collected the corresponding compound icons. We then annotated these icons using an interface, developed specially for this purpose. We finally got a total of 1,000 compound icons, and have made both datasets available on our project webpage. Then, let me introduce our computational pipeline. Given compound concepts as text input, our computational pipeline aims to generate a ranked list of compound icons by considering 3 main factors: semantics, style, and space. To learn to combine constituent icons in compatible ways, we turn to examples of existing compound icons for help. For example, from these 2 icons, the model can learn Hen can be used to represent insurance for semantics. Hen in A is more style compatible to the house in A than hen in B for style. Hen is often put below other objects to indicate protection and insurance for space. To produce the leftmost suggestion list in IconNet, we measure 3S using compatibility scores respectively and calculate the overall compatibility scores for generated compound icon. Please refer to our paper for more technical details. Here are automatic results generated by our computational pipeline for a few compound concepts, which have few or no results in existing icon repositories. Note that our pipeline is able to generate compound icons with more than 2 parts, such as the digital bicycle rental. To evaluate our tool, we invited back the 3 professional designers from our previous interviews. The feedback we received was very positive.
It's convenient for sketching out quick little ideas on the fly. The value of this tool is how little thought it takes.
I like component-wise variations. That is something that totally blew me away.
To examine how IconNet could support novices, we conducted a user study. We asked participants to design icons for presentation slides with a prompt.
Imagine that you are using this slide to pitch a new product that you are developing.
Participants were asked to design the icons using 2 different approaches. One approach was to use online icon repositories and a familiar tool such as PowerPoint to lay out the icons. The other approach was use our IconNet system. We randomized which approach participants were instructed to use first. Here is an example icon they created using 2 different ways. Novices may struggle to combine different icons together using traditional pipeline, while IconNet provides an easy-to-use tool without requiring extensive instruction or onboarding, and allows participants to quickly generate icons they were satisfied with. However, IconNet still has limitations. Icons generated by our tool may not be sufficient for all user needs, since many of our system components can be reused by substituting in a new set of training data. With larger annotated datasets, more diverse results are possible. Rather than only using additive operation, designer-generated icons can be the result of more complex manipulations, such as morphing the shape of one icon to fit another icon, which our system does not currently support. Blindly reusing icons or templates from one compound icon in another can lead to unrecognizable concepts. For example, reusing the song from Hot Weather to represent hot in hot food is invalid. Automatically judging whether an icon is valid and aesthetically pleasing is a hard and subjective task. Our work offers a step in this direction, but there is much future work to be done. The last one, another limitation of our pipeline is the inability to provide adaptive suggestions based on user input. By accepting user-defined input and providing adaptive suggestions, future icon design systems may drive wider adoption of such automated tool. In summary, we introduced IconNet system, a system that facilitates ideation and iteration for compound icon design, a computational pipeline that powers the system, and a data collection process and annotation tool that enables the construction of datasets for the computational pipeline. Here are QR codes for our project webpage and IconNet tool. Finally, I would like to thank you so much for my co-authors and to thank you everyone for watching.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cherry, for that wonderful presentation. And I'm personally really excited to be able to use this tool. So I see Cherry is in the audience and Zoya as well. So what questions do we have for the authors? I can get us started. The sort of classic question that I always have with these sorts of systems, particularly in sort of the creative domain, is how do you sort of balance between the automated suggestions that the system is making and the designer's maybe ability or desire to kind of express themselves creatively? So how do you kind of, have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the tool, our tool is more like a brainstorming tool. Like it provides a good way, a fast way to give users a lot of suggestions, and users can manipulate them. So all the suggestions are based on the existing icons. So there will be save their efforts and also may create some kind of new things and to give them surprising.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think the final product usually still needs the final users to customize and to get the final result. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. And I particularly like that you show multiple suggestions as well as maybe a way to mitigate that effect. Any other questions for the authors? All right, if not, then join me again in thanking Cherry and the authors for a wonderful piece of work.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we have Sarah DiBartolomeu, who is presenting on behalf of folks at Northeastern University about evaluating the effect of timeline shape on visualization task performance.
Hello, everybody. This is Evaluating the Effect of Timeline Shape on Visualization Task Performance. My name is Sarah DiBartolomeu, and in this presentation, I am going to talk to you about timeline shapes. We all know that timelines come in many shapes and forms. When we think about a timeline, this may be the first thing that comes to our mind, a straight horizontal line. In this representation, events are shown as colored dots on the line. We know, though, that this is not the only way to represent a sequence of events. We could use a line, or we could use a circle, a spiral, or any other shape, and they would still convey how one event follows another. And perhaps some shapes would even work better for certain tasks and certain characteristics that the temporal dataset can have. So let's consider the properties of the data that we want to represent. A dataset containing sequences of events can have events that never repeat throughout the dataset, events that repeat, or a mix of the two. We call these groups non-recurrent, recurrent, and mixed. An example of non-recurrent dataset could be a historical timeline in which each event has a date and they do not repeat throughout history. An example of a recurrent dataset is the planting schedule for a farmer. Each plant has a specific time frame in which it needs to be planted, and it reoccurs at about the same time every year. Here, in the representation below, dashed lines represent repetitions, and events of the same type are represented with the same color. You can already see a possible benefit of using different shapes. The spiral can have repeating events be aligned, and the circle can be divided in equal parts, for example. Mixed datasets contain a mix of repeating and non-repeating events. An example of this is the daily schedule of a person. It can have repeating events like classes or weekly recurring meetings, and non-repeating events such as parties or one-time meetings. In the representation, repetition is still highlighted with a dashed line, but there are additional events that do not repeat throughout the dataset. So the question that we asked ourselves at this point is, what timeline shape is best to represent each dataset? Here is a representation with all the dataset types and all the possible shapes that we considered. One could intuitively guess that the best timeline for a non-recurrent dataset could be a line, for example. A circle could be the best option for a recurrent dataset, while perhaps a spiral could do a good job representing a mixed dataset. In order to find out if this intuition was correct, we ran an experiment comparing all these different shapes combined with all these different data types. In order to test our theory, we first interviewed people who deal with timelines every day, a history professor and a researcher working with temporal events in personal health informatics. This helped us understand what people want to learn from timelines in different fields. So we decided to consider these 4 tasks. When, in which we want to figure out the date in which a specific event happened. One example of this would be, when did the earthquake happen? What, in which we want to figure out what event happened at a specific date. For example, what happened in 1999? Find, in which we know both the event and the date, and we want to find the location on the timeline. For example, the earthquake happened in 1898. Find it on the timeline. And finally, compare, in which we want to know the timing of an event relative to another one. For example, did Cleopatra live closer to the launch of the first iPhone or to the construction of the pyramids? And by the way, Cleopatra lived about 2,500 years after the construction of the pyramids and 2,037 years before the launch of the first iPhone. So yes, surprisingly, Cleopatra lived closer to the launch of the first iPhone. We then created 3 datasets, as mentioned before, a historical one for the non-recurrent category, a planting schedule for the recurrent category, and a person schedule for the mixed one. By making up the datasets, we made sure the participants in our experiment would not have any previous knowledge about the data that they would be seeing. This picture shows our initial designs that we would use in our tests. Unfortunately, we soon found out that these colorful designs would introduce additional variables into the experiment, such as colors or the orientation of the text that could influence our results, while instead we just wanted to see the effect of the shape. Therefore, we ended up ditching all of that and trying to achieve a design that would be as plain and simple as possible. We also had to balance the number of data points to be shown in order to be clearly readable on many different screen sizes. We finally decided to settle for 12 data points on every timeline, and all the text had to be horizontal and there would be no timespans, and the text would use a plain Arial font. Our horizontal timeline ended up looking like this. The data and tasks we ended up using, as well as the designs, are extremely simple. We argue that to fully understand the effect of the shape on speed and accuracy, we must start from the simplest datasets and tasks. Another reason behind the simplicity is that timelines are extremely widespread. Since almost everybody encounters timelines daily, simple static visualizations play a valued role in communication. After pre-registering our experiment and analysis, we decided that using Mechanical Turk to recruit participants was our best option, as our target population was vast and very diverse, and Mechanical Turk would allow us to reach a very large audience. We gave each participant a set of 12 counterbalanced questions, every time changing the dataset and the shape of the timeline we were showing them, so that they would observe each dataset type with each shape. So, what did we learn? What we ended up finding out is that there is no overall winner, and no timeline is better than the others in every category. Some timelines work better than others in specific cases, while in some other cases, the choice of shape doesn't make any difference. In terms of timing, in the when task, where participants were asked to find out the date in which a specific event happened, with a mixed dataset, the choice of shape doesn't influence the results. With the recurrent dataset instead, spiral proved to be the slowest shape overall. In the what task, where users were asked to find an event based on a date, vertical timelines were the fastest for mixed and non-recurrent datasets. In the find task, where users were given a date and an event and were asked to click on it on the timeline, there wasn't much of a difference between the different shapes. The compare task, in which users were asked to compare 2 timespans, again showed that spirals were slowest, except for the mixed dataset, in which there was no difference between circle, horizontal line, and spiral. Regarding accuracy instead, we didn't find meaningful differences between the different shapes. Thus, we can't say that participants answered more precisely to questions on a shape rather than on another one. We just found out that the compare task, that was more memory intensive than the others, produced worse results. At the end of the experiment, participants could fill out an optional survey in which they were asked to express their preferences and opinions. In this chart, you can see the percentage of participants who selected each one of the shapes as easiest to read for each task. In most cases, horizontal line had the most preferences. Spirals and circles gain slightly more preferences on recurrent datasets, but are still less preferred than lines. From the survey, we received some interesting comments that pertained directly to the shape of the timelines. This gave us a notion of how the participants felt about certain shapes to an extent that they cared enough to express it in an optional feedback section. In this case, too, the majority of the comments were in favor of the horizontal and vertical lines. The comments were of similar trend. A few remarked in favor of the circular shape. The spiral shape also had a few admirers under its belt. However, on the flip side, some of these participants revealed concerns about the spiral shape, stating it to be difficult and confusing. Considering the findings of our experiment, we formulated some design recommendations for timelines using one of the dataset types we considered. Here is a list of recommendations regarding timeline readability. Use linear vertical timelines for situations which require fast data lookup. Avoid spiral timelines when the task requires fast lookup. If you use a more creative, expressive shape, such as a spiral timeline, also include a tutorial or visual cues to assist the user in learning and understanding. Regarding task performance, tasks which require long-term memory dependence, like the compare task, are slower and less accurate on all the timeline designs. This effect is amplified with spiral timelines. We recommend using linear timelines for difficult tasks which require complicated decision-making. And lastly, regarding dataset flexibility, within the study, we did not find that dataset choice affects the readability of the timeline. Therefore, we recommend designers to be flexible with their choice of timeline shape to maximize readability or improve engagement. However, if the dataset is complex, even for mixed data, we recommend using a linear timeline. We want to stress that the importance of the following points, especially regarding timing, heavily depends on the context. For instance, in emergency medicine, a difference of a few seconds may be much more relevant than for reading a timeline published in a magazine. The one on the right, for example, represents the blood glucose values of a person with diabetes throughout a day. A medical professional may have to look through many of these charts in a span of a short amount of time. Therefore, this is a situation in which fast data lookup is relevant. It is also very important to keep in mind the expressiveness of the data, how well the timeline shape can represent the underlying data. For instance, representing linear data on a circular shape may be misleading to the readers by inducing them into thinking there are recurrences in the data when there are none. Here, for example, this type of spiral visualization on the right is widely used in schoolbooks to represent how long and complex the history of life on Earth has been before humankind. Here, the spiral is used to convey the sense that the more we go back in time, the more our knowledge becomes sparse. We therefore suggest designers carefully evaluate our recommendations based on their domain goals and specific use case. In the end, timeline visualizations are purposive in our everyday life. However, we know little about ways to design timelines effectively. In this work, we learned that the shape does indeed affect the readability of timelines. We found good evidence that lines support reading the timelines quicker than the nonlinear shapes. We also found evidence that spirals are not only perceived confusing by users, but are also slower in lookup tasks. We hope our work will encourage future research on the topic. So this is it. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out more, our paper, results, and code are available on OSF.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, for that really clear presentation. It's wonderful to get these empirical results for timeline visualizations. And I wanted to also give you all major kudos for pre-registering your study results and putting all that material on OSF. So we see Sarah and Cody in the participants here on Zoom. What questions do we have of them? I guess I can warm up the crowd here. I think one of my favorite parts of your process was you began by, I think, talking to folks in the digital humanities, you said, because they'd had a lot of experience working with timelines. And I'm curious, if you were to speculate, your study was kind of conducted on a broad audience of mechanical Turkers. Do you imagine you might get different results for, if you'd studied folks that are really specialized in reading these timelines?
Well, yes, definitely. Depending on the context, you would want to use a timeline in different ways. So getting a broad audience was meant to try to catch as many as these different uses that you may want to look for in a timeline. But yes, I definitely think you would get different results.
Any other questions for the authors? Is there any more you want to say about 3D timelines? I see a question in the chat about that.
There are a ton of other possible different options that we could have explored. We tried sticking to the simplest thing we could do, and 3D would definitely have been a huge amount of variables added in those designs.
Makes sense. Got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much again, Sarah. We might move on to our next talk. So our next talk is by Yalong Yang, presenting on behalf of folks at Monash and Harvard about tactile presentation of network data. Should be text, matrices, or diagrams.
In this paper, we explore different tactile representations of network data for blind or low vision or BLV people. This work is within the big vision of improving the accessibility of visualizations for BLV people. Visualizations are widely used to present data. Taking advantage of the powerful human visual system, visualizations are capable of conveying complex information with intuitive graphics. Sighted people usually can perceive information from a well-designed visualization easily. Unfortunately, BLV people cannot benefit from visualizations directly. Furthermore, due to the popularity of visualizations, many important information becomes inaccessible to them. Choi and his co-author developed a system that can retrieve the raw data from a visualization and then use a screen reader to read the numbers. Their nice work make it possible for BLV people to access the raw information. However, only simple visualizations are supported in their system, for example, line chart, bar chart. Furthermore, representing data in its raw format is not an effective way to pass on information. The user may experience a heavy memory overload. Compared to information in raw format, tactile representation has the potential to preserve the visual information into a format that is accessible for BLV people. There are studies investigating different parameters for producing tactile visualizations. There are also studies comparing graphic tactile representations to text representation, that is Braille. However, these studies are again focused on simple standard statistic charts. In this paper, we focus on tactile representation of network data. Network data are widely collected. In a network, there are nodes that represent entities and links that represent relationships between these entities. Network visualizations are commonly used and well studied. However, to the best of our knowledge, there is no study on how to best represent network data in accessible format. We investigate this by first exploring the design options and then conducting a user study with 8 experienced touch readers on swell papers. Swell paper is made of a special material. It swells along black lines and diagrams after being heated. It is one of the most popular ways to create tactile graphics. The most familiar representation to touch readers should be in the format of text or Braille. With text, we can simply list the neighbors for each node. For example, here, A is friends with C and D. We do the same thing for all nodes, and then use the Braille to create tactile representations. Apart from using text, we also consider more graphic way to represent network data. Node link diagrams and matrices are arguably the most widely used visualization for network data. We adapt this to representation to tactile format for the user study. Let us look at the matrix first. In a matrix, each row or column is showing one node. Here we are showing the node for A, C, and D. We use a circle at the intersection to indicate there exists a link between two nodes. Here we are showing the in-link between A and C. In addition to these standard designs, there are several design choices for creating a tactile matrix. A matrix usually has grid lines to help align rows and columns. Apart from making the lines go through the center of the cells, another alternative is making the cell inside the grid. We piloted these two representations with an experienced touch reader, and she clearly preferred the first option. A good order of rows and columns can help the user identify high-level patterns. We follow the recommendation from past research and use the optimal leaf ordering to calculate the order of rows and columns. We also keep the matrix symmetry, that is, the rows and columns have the same order. We also use the Braille labels on the left for rows and on the top for columns. These labels are essential for participants to know which rows and columns correspond. We also use the spur wheel to mark the diagonal line with the texture distinct from the other lines. We expect this diagonal line can help our participant to understand the symmetry of the matrix. Let us then look at the node link diagram. As we already introduced, we use circles to represent nodes and lines connecting nodes to indicate their relationships. Crossings are inevitable for creating node link diagrams. We consulted with an experienced transcriber about the ways of representing the crossings. She suggested introducing gaps to make it easier for touch readers to distinguish the individual lines. We also tested different gaps with her and chose the one she preferred for the user study. Another important design choice for node link diagrams is the layout. Force-directed or organic layout is the most widely used layout for node link diagrams. We included it in our user study. Alternative to the force-directed layout, orthogonal layout has been tested to be preferred by sighted readers and required less memory load. We conjectured that touch readers would find these diagrams easier to navigate and that they would find it easier to build an actual mental model of the network. We did not use technical terminologies in the user study. Instead, we used the friendships to explain the concepts. For example, in a node link diagram, each node is a person, and if there is a link between two nodes, that means these two people are friends with each other. From the literature, we identified 6 essential tasks for exploring network data. We measured both time and accuracy for performance. We also recorded self-reported difficulty and strategies from our participants. Next, I'm going to introduce our tasks and results. The first task is estimate the number of friendship links. This task investigates how different representations help the user to capture an overview of the data. We normalize the error rate with the answer from participant using the following formula. Close to 0 means more accurate, above 0 means overestimate, and below 0 means underestimate. We did not find statistical significance comparing different representations. Interestingly, in the node link representations, participants consistently underestimate the number. The reason may be that the lines representing links are not textually salient. For the self-reported difficulty, overall, this task seems considerably difficult for touch readers. The second task is how many friendship groups are in the social network. This task was looking at the connectivity of the network topology by identifying clusters. We used the same way to normalize error rate. We found the 2 node link diagrams were more accurate. Statistic tests revealed that node link diagrams were significantly more accurate than matrix in small data and text in large data. This is in line with the self-reported difficulty, which was also higher with the text and matrix, though only statistically significant for text. When analyzing the time, we aggregate the time of these 2 tasks, as participants were aware they were going to be asked task 2 when they were exploring task 1. We found participants took significantly longer with text than with the other 3 representations. Participants also reported to have relatively well-defined strategies for node link diagrams and matrices for identifying clusters. They either identify closed groups or the bridge between groups. While in text, participants reported they could only make an educated guess. One participant also mentioned he tried to build a matrix representation in his head as he had just seen that in the previous trials. Some other participants tried but felt quite difficult to do so and commented, "It is overwhelming for me to think about all that." The third task is find the two people with sticky plasticine. Are they friends? This task investigates topology adjacency. All participants could complete this task correctly. We found the two node link diagrams were faster than matrix and text. Text was also faster than matrix. This is also occurred with self-report difficulty, where the node link diagrams were considered easier than matrix. When discussing the strategies, participants commented following the rows and columns in a matrix is not easy. The matrix is also considered to be too cluttered. Participants also feel the diagonal line sometimes distracted them. The next task is still looking at topology adjacency, which is find the three people with sticky plasticine. How many friends do they each have? Again, all participants were able to complete this task correctly. We found the text was faster than the matrix. As discussed, the difficulty of following rows and columns in the matrix may slow down our participants. Self-reported difficulty was similar for all representations. The next task is looking at common connections. We asked, find the two people with sticky plasticine. Who are their mutual friends? We found the organic node link diagram and the text were faster than the matrix. Participants tended to feel more difficult with the matrix, but was not statistically significant. In the text, participants heavily relied on memory. They read along two rows and then identify the friends in common. In the matrix, participants traced down the column or row in parallel and found corresponding circles. The last task, we asked participants to find the two people with sticky plasticine, then find a path of direct friends connecting them. We found the node link diagram was significantly faster than text and matrix. Participants also found node link diagram significantly easier than text and matrix. In both text and matrix representations, participants heavily relied on their memory to search the possible paths. In the matrix, participants also mentioned to use the spatial layout to guide the search. For example, look at E and H's friends, remember this, then say semi-systematically looking for links between these. I use both the rows and columns to go to the next person. In the node link diagram, a common practice is following the link directly heading towards the destination node. If it is a dead end, the participant then backtracked and tried the link most closely to the direction of the destination, following links in that direction until reaching the destination. We also asked participants to rate the understandability and imaginability of different representations. Unsurprisingly, the node link diagram overall had a higher rating than the text and matrix. One representative comment is, liked the node link representation, imagined the nodes as people. This wasn't true for the Braille list. There, they were just letters and numbers. We also asked participants to rank the intuitiveness and usability of these representations. Again, we found participants prefer node link diagrams than the text and matrix. Representative comments are, love these organic graphics. They make it so easy. This is how I would show someone what a social network is. Liked the regularity of the grid, made it predictable. Grid and right angles help me to make more memorable mental image. In this study, we found node link diagrams are the overall winner. They were faster and easier for the tested tasks. There is also little difference between the two different layouts. Participants performed unexpectedly badly with the matrix. Participants found it by far the hardest representation to understand. One particular difficulty was understanding that the matrix was symmetric and that the diagonal was a line of symmetry. Such information is immediately apparent visually, but not when explored by touch. Matrix was also complained to be too cluttered. Removing the line may improve the matrix representation. Surprisingly, we found text representation performed reasonably well. However, participant comments revealed that it placed a higher demand on working memory. It thus may have difficulty scaling to large networks. Interestingly, one participant reported that the textual representation led to a linguistic representation rather than a graphic image. This research contributes to a more nuanced understanding of the relative advantages of text and graphics to BLV people. For extracting local information, tactile graphics have no benefits over text or list. For the global reasoning, tactile graphics can be more effective than text or list. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Yalang. I think this is really important work as we figure out how to build more accessible data representations. So we have time for one brief question, and I see one from Cody here about asking whether you want to report any other sort of comments your participants had, particularly when looking at sort of the orthogonal layouts and their predictability.
Yes, we have a lot of more detailed comments in the paper, but from the orthogonal one, actually, surprisingly, people actually felt more like the organic one. They feel the wild layout, feel them have more free style to explore the network compared to the orthogonal one. Previously, we thought about the orthogonal will be more regular and people can remember it better, but actually this is not true for our participants. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I believe we're out of time with this visualization session. So join me in thanking all of the authors that presented today. And next up, we will transition over to Ken, who will be chairing our last session on fabrication.
Thank you, Arvind. And thank you all the session chairs and also the presenters for presenting amazing work. So applause, virtual applause. So next session I'm chairing is a fabrication session, and we have 4 very interesting papers here. And before introducing the first talk, I would like to say that there is a Twitter hashtag you can tweet, and also if you have a question, please ask through the Zoom chat. You can directly comment in it, and I will pick up after each talk so the author can answer to you. You can also ask lively, but okay, is the first talk author Junhee here? If you can start sharing.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Perfect.
So the first, okay, I can start introducing your paper. So the first paper title is Curved Boards, Integrating Breadboards into Physical Objects to Prototype Function in the Context of Form. And this is presented by Junhee Zhu from MIT CSAIL with lots of other amazing co-authors. And yes. I hope everyone is seeing the thing. Okay. Cool. And yeah, please go ahead and start.
Can you guys all see the slides?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Junhee Zhu. I'm currently a 3rd-year PhD student at MIT CSAIL, HCIE group working with Professor Stephanie Mueller. Today, I'm presenting Curved Board, integrating breadboards into physical object to prototype function in the context of form. Before we jump into all the curved board concept, let's first take a look at how people do early stage circuit prototyping and interaction design nowadays. Not surprisingly, breadboards. Breadboards are great. It's easily plug and unplug and repositioning the components, which leads to high function flexibility. And you can switch them between the project, which have high reusability. However, while testing the function on a physical prototype, they don't usually integrate well with the physical form. One alternative is to use customized PCB or protoboards. They fit to physical objects better. However, once fabricated, it's impossible to move components, and each design iteration requires soldering and desoldering, which is time-consuming and have very low function flexibility. The question is it possible to keep the function flexibility of breadboards while also integrating well with the form of the prototype? Our solution is curve boards, integrating breadboards into physical object to prototype function in the context of form. Curve boards better preserve the object's look and feel while maintaining high function flexibility. Curve boards build on some of the amazing previous works. On a spectrum of the prototype stages from breadboard to PCB, we first have on the breadboard side, circuit stack, toast board, and circuit stances that have equally high function flexibilities. On the PCB end, we have the surf kit, VUI kit that can mimic the final design in both physical and digital world. Therefore, they have very, very high form flexibility. However, there isn't much in the between to cover the gap. So we implemented curve board with both high function flexibility and high form flexibility. Some of the use cases that we think can especially be benefit from the curve boards. First, finding efficient and ergonomic component layout. While designing an interactive headphones, curve boards help narrow down component locations like buttons and controls and knobs for the most suitable control layout. Second, ensuring that the components fit onto the prototype. During the design process of a heart rate monitoring Trinity bracelet, we iterate through different functions and components, especially the interactive components like OLED display, to make sure that all the components fit onto the prototype. The third is preserving look and feel. Curve boards allow users to prototype function directly on small and delicate objects like ring, which is very hard to achieve with normal breadboards. Fourth is preserving an object's intended functions. As you can see on this frisbee, with all the functions working and all the electronics attached, still works and functions like a frisbee that throws. Fifth is identifying component needs. With the help of curve board, direct hands-on interaction helps us design an interactive teapot with teapot monitoring functions. It has temperature monitoring and the T-shade monitoring with the camera module, so that we will know exactly when the tea is ready. Cheers. Next is I'll go through the curve board system. Curve board system have two parts. First is an interactive 3D editor. Second is the fabrication method associated with it. Let's look at the 3D editor first. We will load the 3D model into curve board system and first convert it into a set of pinholes. Notice that each of the gray dots on the object is a potential pinhole positions for user to select later. Next, we will creating the board layout by adding VCC, ground, and terminal channels directly on the object. Once you are satisfied with design, we can export and prepare for fabrication. As you can see, the system generates the 3D printable files as the user design, and all the inner channels are connected as user designed before. The system also supports automatic channel layout. We can use it as a starting point and then add and delete channels on the initial design layout. Second is the fabrication method. We first 3D printed the exported curve board housing. Next, we'll prepare the conduct silicon for the infill. We mix the carbon fiber into the silicon part A, stirring for 5 minutes, and then add the part B, stirring for another 5 minutes. Then we transfer the contact silicon into a syringe. And then we fill the contact silicon into the previously 3D printed housing. One alternative fabrication method could be the dual material 3D printing, like from the company called ACEO. They're able to print the general purpose silicon and the contact silicon in one run. Currently, the technology is still under developing, so there have the limits of the both printing volume and low conductivity, which can only light up LEDs. But the future is right at the doorstep. After fabricate the curve board, we'll do the surface coloring to visualize the channel layout. On the left is a system rendering from the curve board 3D editor. For most of the curve boards we build, we use hand-drawn markers to directly draw on the object to save some time. For more advanced uses, users can also choose to four-color 3D print the curve boards. For example, on the right, this one is printed by DaVinci 3D printer. Next, we'll do evaluation of the curve board. We'll first evaluate the conductivity and durability of our conduct silicon, and then we'll have a user study to evaluate the curve board use cases. Let's look at the first one. We'd like to know how conductive our conduct silicon is. So we pick one of the channels with 6 pinhole apart and do the testing. As you can see, on average, there are 8.5 ohms per extra pinholes. It's worth noticing that more than 95% of channels in all our curve boards are short terminal channels, which have roughly 30 to 60 ohms, which is comparable to standard breadboards. They usually have more than 93% of the short terminal channels. As a result, both digital signals and analog signals can perform on our curve board. Next is the testing of the durability. Want to know how durable our channels are. We don't want to just print it once and then throw it away. So we sit down and plug the channels for 100 times. We measure the resistance of the channels every 10 plugs. Surprisingly, the resistance gets better after plugs, at least for the first 20 plugs. The hypotheses are the poking pinhole packs the carbon fiber tighter, which results in higher conductivity. We also test 6-month-old contact silicon channels, and there's no statistically significant difference found. Next is the evaluation with users. We conduct a preliminary user study. Users will either have traditional breadboards plus separate 3D printed prototype or curve board of the same form factor to each complete a task sequence. The participant were told which electronic components to use, but not where to place them. They were asked to optimize layout of the interactive components for ergonomic and efficient interactions. Some of the results we have here. Overall, 5 out of 6 participants stated preference for curve board over the 2D breadboards in prototyping interaction designs. We summarize additional observations and quantitative feedbacks. First, attaching the breadboard to the prototype. In the 2D breadboard scenario, most participants uses double-sided tape to directly tape on the the breadboard. Once placed, however, the breadboards were hard to move around in case additional boards have to be added or provide more wiring space for the components. Second is the predefined board size and component density. While using 2D breadboards, participants found a challenge to place related electronic components close to each other, like OLED screens and their corresponding control buttons. The 3D breadboards have all the wire holes already there, so that it's easier to move things around and redesign the layout. We also have some request improvements, like firmware connection when plugging wires, and to also have curved and flexible electronics components available to better adapt to the object form. Notice that this user study is still a preliminary study. More further feedbacks are required for the 3D editors and the fabrication method. Next, let's look at the implementations. For short of time, I will only focus on two parts. First is generating the pinholes. Second is generating the geometry of channels. Let's look at the pinholes first. To generate the pinholes, we build on the Instant Mesh open source libraries. Since we want the object become a quad mesh, we set the orientation field and the position field to 4. We also make sure that all the generated pinholes will fold on the sharp folds of the surface and align to the boundaries of the object. The final ones, we also make sure each of the diameter of the quad mesh is as close as to 2.54 millimeter as possible, which is the standard spacing used by breadboards for pinholes. Second is generating the geometry of channels. For all the channel positions user indicated, we move that inward to the object and then created a channel with height of 4 millimeter and width of 2 millimeter by default channel dimension. For more complex geometries, we also have adaptive channels. For example, for the channel thickness, the channel height will automatically adapt to the object's thickness. We also have the width adaptation to adapt with the object's curvature so that channels don't collapse onto each other. Some of the limitations. First, number of pins and curvature of surface. While the curve boards can be basic arbitrary 3D geometries, electronic components are rigid. Components with high pin numbers might not be stick and fit onto highly curved surfaces. We run a quick analysis with all the sensors we found on SparkFun. Around 83% of them have less than 7 pins on one row, which can fit onto most of the curve boards. Second is the thickness of required prototypes. Since we embedded channels directly inside of the object, some amount of the thickness is required. For the default channels, about 6 millimeter thickness is needed. With adaptive channels, we can further narrow that down to around 3 millimeter for the thickness, but it's at the expense of higher resistance. Last one is the regularity of pin spacing. While our algorithm minimizes these issues, several pins on a board's surface are not regularly placed due to the deformed quad as a result of quad meshing. We leave those areas empty to prevent invalid pin spacing on the surface. Something for discussion. First is the reusability. Traditional breadboards have a generic form factor, which allow them to be reused across different circuit design and projects. By designing the curve board as a generic template can also achieve similar things. For example, this curve board wearable template, we can design both the smartwatch and the decorative bracelet using the same curve board template. Second is a flexible electronics. While curve board works with flat, rigid electronic components, they don't integrate that well with the shape of the physical prototype. Although up to date, flexible electronics still rare and ongoing development, we envision that future curve boards will primarily be used with the flexible components of adaptive curvatures. Conclusion of the talk. We present curve boards, 3D breadboards directly integrated into the surface of physical prototypes. We demonstrated curve boards' applicability across a range of different application scenarios and object geometries. For future work, we plan to extend curve board to support different sized or spaced parts and explore potential volumes for customer-shaped electronics that better fit with the curve board geometries. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Junhee, for the amazing talk. I think we have time for a short question. Paul, do you want to turn on your mic and ask, or I can also read up for you? Okay. 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 Here it's not just joking. I had one quick question about having more like deformable breadboard might be really interesting future work, or having hinges and you can have motors to make some kind of like robotic breadboard or something. Have you can you touch on those kind of future work?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We can definitely explore on that in the future works. Some of the curve boards we built, since the system outputs of 3D printable models, you could choose your materials to print them. For some of the first stage deformable curve boards, you could print with TPUs. Actually, one of our RAIN designs printed by ACEO is printed by silicons. So it's kind of deformable. It's not like free form, but we have some ability of deformation. But that's a great point.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
thank you.
I would like to move on to next talk, which I need to share screen.
I will stop sharing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Great talk. Okay, so next talk is titled GID, Identifying 3D Print Using Slicing Parameters. And Doga from MIT CCell is presenting, and this also, paper also have authors from Sussex University. So I will play the pre-recorded video now.
Hi, I'm Doa from MIT CCell, and today I will present GID, a method for identifying 3D prints using slicing parameters. Let me start with our motivation. For many years, tags have been used in many applications in HCI, and they're everywhere in our lives. As the simplest example, we have barcodes and QR codes pretty much everywhere. And these can be integrated into 3D objects as well. In the case of QR codes, they can be embossed onto 3D surfaces. Or in the case of barcodes, they can be projected onto 3D shapes. While these approaches have enabled tags in 3D, they may have one issue. They are visible to the human eye. For this reason, researchers have come up with ways to hide them. These methods either require the use of large or expensive scanning equipment or specialized printing materials. For example, AirCode uses a camera and projector setup to detect gaps beneath the object surface. Infrastruct uses a terahertz scanner to detect even deeper holes. Layer Code uses near-infrared dyes and a modified SLA printer to have hidden barcodes. These issues limit how 3D tags can be used today, as we either have to live with visible tags or have complicated equipment to scan subtler tags. With GID, our goal is to have unobtrusive tags that are easy to fabricate and that can be detected using low-cost scanning equipment. And the thing is, we actually do not create these tags. They're already there. GID uses the patterns that are already created by the regular 3D printing process. As you see here, when you 3D print an object, it inherently has distinct features due to the path the printer lays down. And if we have multiple copies that each have a different path layout, as you see here, we can distinguish them. Now, let's talk about what determines how these lines are printed. Before a model is sent to a 3D printer, the user has to convert it into machine instructions, which is called a G-code file. This process, called slicing, is done by using the software tool called a slicer. The slicer software takes as input various parameters, such as the line angle and width, and outputs a G-code file for the printer. Now, if we manipulate these parameters for each of the copies we want to have, they will each have a unique surface texture, as you see on the right-hand side. By taking a picture of the final prints and using image processing techniques, we can distinguish them. Thus, we meet our goals, which were to have unobtrusive tags that can be simply fabricated with an off-the-shelf 3D printer and scanned using accessible equipment, such as a mobile phone camera. Now let's talk about the GID pipeline, consisting of two steps, tagging and identifying. We will use an example where we will create a set of 40 unique key covers for our research group. At the end of the semester, when lab members depart, we often forget to write down who has returned their keys. Using GID, we can quickly identify whom the previously returned keys belong to. Let's start with the first step, tagging. We first load the 3D model of the key cover by dragging it onto the canvas. We enter the number of instances we want, in this case 40, select mobile phone as the desired detection method, and click Generate Previews, which slices each instance with a unique set of slicing settings and shows the results. Here you see the differences in slicing settings, for example in the line angles. We can now enter a label in the form of a text, an image, or a URL next to the preview of each instance. Since we want to give each cover the name of one of our lab members, we enter one name per instance. We do this for 40 members and finally click Export. Upon clicking the Export button, each instance's G-code file is saved, as well as a dictionary file which stores the labels. We can now send the G-code files to our printer. Next, the second step, identifying. As you see, although the printed keys look the same at first, they have differences in their print paths. We first launch the GID mobile app and select the model we would like to scan from the object library. The app then helps us align the camera image with the object by showing the target and the detected outlines, similar to how chat caching or document scanning apps work. When the outlines are aligned in this human-in-the-loop setting, the app automatically captures and processes the image. After identifying the texture, it retrieves the user-assigned label and shows it on the screen. We check off the lab members who returned their keys and send a reminder to everyone else. In the previous scenario, we talked about how we can detect textures on the object surface. GID can also sense the interior of objects by adding a light source to the detection setup. Because of the translucent nature of regular PLA filaments, shining light on the prints reveals their infill. As you see here, we can distinguish between different infill patterns. For infill detection, we use a stationary setup with an integrated light source. As you see here, we can distinguish between different instances of the same 3D model that otherwise look similar. Now, one important question we need to answer is, how many instances can we distinguish between using this technique? Before I dive into the details, here I would like to show the final results briefly. We can have 204 instances using a camera, and more than 17,000 instances if we use both a camera and a light. To come to these results, we need to look into two sub-questions. First, which 3D printing parameters can we manipulate at all? Let's start with the surface-related parameters. For the base surface, we can vary the line angle and the line width. For the side surface, we can vary the layer angle by reorienting the object and the layer height. For the infill, we can vary the angle, the width, and the pattern. Here's an overview again of all of these parameters. Now, let's answer the second sub-question, which is, per parameter, how many variations can we detect with a film camera? To figure this out, we tested hundreds of copies that we printed with different settings. I had already shown you the results briefly, as you see here. Now, let's talk about where these numbers came from. For example, 204 for the base pattern. In our experiments, we determined that two baseline angles can be distinguished with 100% accuracy if they have a difference of at least 5 degrees. Similarly, for a baseline width, the difference has to be 0.5 millimeters for 100% accuracy. This gives us 34 and 6 values, respectively. Multiplying these values, we come to a total of 204 for the base surface. A similar process was performed for other parameters. For the complete evaluation, please refer to the paper. Now, let's talk about the image processing techniques we have used. First, for the surface patterns. For this type of detection, we use an image registration and Fourier transforms, as you see in this demonstration. Secondly, for detecting the infill, we use adaptive thresholding and template matching. To detect the infill parameters, we first need to remove the traces on the surface. We do this by increasing the contrast, blurring the image, and applying adaptive thresholding to binarize the image. Now we can apply template matching to find the correct type of infill, in this case, trihexagon. We also evaluated our system under different hardware-related and environmental conditions, including different lighting conditions, filament colors, 3D printers, and camera resolutions. For the complete evaluation, please refer to our paper. Now, I would like to introduce some of our applications. First, GID is great for user identification. In this example, we have 3D printed mugs that each have a different infill, which this coffee maker can detect using a camera and a light source. After recognizing the mug and identifying its owner, the machine pours their favorite drink. GID can also be used for finding optimal print settings. This is especially useful when users want to replicate existing 3D prints. Oftentimes, we try various print settings to see which one works best for a given model. In this case, one of these 3D prints has the best mechanical integrity, and the user wants to identify its slicing parameters. Rather than carefully writing down which settings were used for which one, the maker can retrieve this information by simply taking a picture with our app. Now, I would like to discuss some of the limitations of GID. An obvious limitation is that we need to have objects that have a rotationally asymmetric contour. Objects whose bases are rotationally symmetric are challenging because, for example, for a circle, the user would not know how to align it to take a picture. For certain shapes, the number of identifiable angles is reduced. For example, for a square base, the maximum angle goes down from 180 to 90 degrees. An interesting discussion for future work is whether GID will still apply to newer and higher resolution 3D printing technologies. For this, we looked into SLA and DLP printing, and yes, these also have their own artifacts. As you see on the left, although SLA achieves better resolutions than FDM, individual layers can still be distinct. On the right, you see how in DLP printing, the object pattern creates rectangular voxels that cause the edges to look stepped. Further, most printing methods use infill, so the general idea of varying the infill still applies. We therefore think that our method will stay relevant. Another point to consider is that as 3D printing improves, cameras will get better as well. Just as an example, Samsung's latest image sensor for phones has a 108 megapixel resolution. So before I conclude, let me briefly summarize. In this project, our goal was to add tagging to 3D objects that is not as visible to the human eye and does not require complex printing or scanning hardware, which we have achieved using off-the-shelf FDM printers and regular mobile phone cameras. So thank you very much for your interest, and we invite you to read our paper. Thank you.
Cool, Doga. Thanks so much for the great presentation. Is there any question from the audience? I think I would like to start. This might be a weird question, but I was wondering if you guys had like speculated about the security with this printer, and I really like how you have like dual encoding capability from the surface, but also in the infill, where it could be some infill is some kind of like hidden message, while there is some surface information on the thing. But so I was wondering if you guys had like some discussion on that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. When we first started this project, one of the possible applications was security, or identification for security purposes. But then we didn't want to go into that direction because that could have some other implications about privacy and other things. So right now, for this initial work, we don't think that this should be used for, security applications, but for future work, definitely that would be a great extension. And especially if you can encode more data by combining these different patterns. So if you had multiple tiles of different patterns, then you could also increase the code capacity, and this would also increase the security, I think.
I was actually also thinking like when this thing is like widely used, people can read the information through their hands or something. But
Yeah. Oh, it's a really good point. Yeah. Again, when we first started, we didn't just look into like computer vision, but we also thought about, how can we use these differences in slicing settings and identify these by, listening to, scratches, for example. If, two surfaces were printed using different slicing settings, you can scratch them and they would sound different. Or you could touch them and they would feel different, as you said, tactile. And I think that would be great for, people with visual impairment.
That's very interesting. I have one question from Paul. Paul, do you want to talk in live?
Yeah, sure. One of the convenient things, if you can see the label, is that you can scan it. And with your examples, it's kind of hidden, and typically it's considered good design if an object kind of reveals what it's capable of doing. So I was just wondering why specifically this desire to have it hidden.
Yeah, so usually, when you 3D print something, aesthetics are important, I think. You want the object to look as it is, and introducing an obvious tag might kind of ruin that. That's why sometimes it's good to hide these tables. For example, for QR codes, there's also previous work on really like hiding that by using different color, what is it called? Color tuning and color toning, sorry, yeah. And that's why there have been efforts to hide these tags.
Cool. Thank you. With that, I would like to thank Doga for the amazing presentation. Please look at the paper too. And I would like to move on to the next talk, which is also pre-recorded and which is also from MIT CCell. And Yin Julen is going to present, or I think the presenter is Parnia. So let's start the talk.
Hello everyone, my name is Prinya Panpongsanon from University, and today I will give a talk on behalf of my team on the paper called Food Fab, Creating Food Perception Illusions Using Food 3D Printing. And this work also together with Jin Julin, Sin Wen, Daisuke Iwai, Kosuke Sato, Marina Obris, and Stephen Muller. And the work in collaborations between Osaka University, University of Sussex, and MIT CCL. So eating too much is a real problem. So what we can do about this? We can looking for what actually causes us to feel either full or hungry. And we found that this is from the perceived satiety. The perceived satiety is considered as how the person satisfies with the appetite, rather than actual physical fullness. For example, one piece of cookie might be enough for sustain healthy. However, person might eat more to satisfy the appetite. And the way to reduce or balance the sustain healthy and satisfied appetite is eat slowly. To chew more food can enhance the perceived satiety. So how we can make you chew more? State-of-the-art technologies come up with the visually augmented the food by making it appears visually larger or change how it smells. Our method physically modify the food with the food 3D printing. Based on the 3D printing food with the difference in food patterns and the infusion density. We conduct the experiments to find out the best infusion parameter, and so that people eat a lot of cookies in our study. Our experimental results found that the difference in food patterns lead to different chewing time. For example, the honeycomb patterns make the participants chew more, comparing to linear, which make the participants chew less. And for more details, be looking for our paper. Based on the experimental results, we summarize that we might need to eat less honeycomb cookie than lectin cookies to make you feel equally full. Let's come to details about this work. First, we need to address how these infill and chewing times are related to the perceived satiety. And let's look back to the previous work. Many researchers already investigated that the slower eating trend to reduce the amounts of food intake than the fast eater, due to the fast eating increasing the concentrations of the calorie in the blood, and that metabolism has turned from the calorie into the fatty acids. However, the chewing time doesn't only the ways that manipulate the food perceptions and eating longer or shorter. However, the size of the portions of food is reported as the effective ways to manipulate the food perceptions, especially to manipulate or to maintain the level of perceived satieties. Looking into the imaging field, researchers already translated this knowledge into the computational experience, for example, by using augmented realities. For example, by visually enhancing the size of food to manipulate the food intake. Or looking into how deliciousness of the food by manipulate or modify its appearance. While the previous work allows to manipulate the perceived satieties, the AR technologies are not practical as is need for physical attached to the body and modify the eating experience. In other words, we are seeking the ways to avoid this by doing it physically inside the food. And our solution is to use the food 3D printing to integrate it directly with the food so that it is no attachment necessary, and also physically enhance the perceived satieties based on each personal individual. So the next question is, what 3D printing parameters can we use to manipulate the chewing time? For a standard 3D printing machine, the typical parameters are the layer, infills, and the outer shell. The infills can be varies the mechanical properties of their objects, and so that we assume it could be applied to the food printing too. We're selecting most effective infill patterns, including the honeycomb, Hilbert, and Lecaninia, and they vary of the different infill density, including 70% infill, 50% infill, and 39% infill. The next question is, we have to understand how those parameters and the chewing time are related. To understand this, we conduct 2 user studies to find out the effective of the different infill patterns and the infill density to influence the chewing time. We selected cookies as the food choice for our experiments, and it's allowed to keep the study structure and the shape of the bake. In addition, we can directly compare our method to the state-of-the-art like Narumi et al. In CHI 2012. In the first experiment, we compared 3 different infill patterns. The participants eat 10 cookies, each type per day. For example, they were asked to eat honeycomb cookies on the first day, and then they have to come back to eat the Hilbert cookie for the next day. During the experiments, we collect the chewing times through the EMG sensor, and after each cookie, the participant answer the questionnaire. And for more details, please refer to your paper. As I mentioned in the introductions, we found that the honeycomb infill patterns provide longer chewing time, while the Lecanias provide a shorter chewing time. We fit the chewing results to the perceived satieties led by the participants and found that the perceived satieties is slightly increasing with the longer chewing time and slightly decreasing with the shorter chewing times. However, we cannot find the significant amounts of the different infill patterns. Not only the infill patterns, in the second experiment, we compared 3 different infill density by using the honeycomb infill patterns that provide longer chewing time from the previous experiment. However, for this time, we also modify the size of the cookie. For example, with the 29% of the infill cookie, it looks more larger, and 70% infill cookies will look more like smaller. Similar to the experiment 1, the participants eat 10 cookies each type per day. For example, they were asked to eat type 1 39% infill patterns in the day 1, and then come back for the type 2 55% infill for the day 2. From the experiments, we found that the cookie with the lower infill density but larger in the size provide longer shaving time, and the cookie with the higher infill density but smaller in size provides shorter shaving time. When looking at the questionnaire results, the participant laid the cookie with 39% infill but larger in the appearance more full compared to 70% infills but smaller appearance. We found significant difference amounts of the three types of the cookie infill. To conclude, from the experience, we learned that 3D printed food with the different infill patterns and the infill density does affects to the shaving time. So the next question is, how can we integrate what we learned into the system that people use on a daily basis? So that we create a food fab system. The goal of our system is that users only input what they want to eat and how hungry they are, such that if they are not very hungry, the system will generate the shorter shaving time of the food for them. Otherwise, if they are super hungry, the system will generate the longer shaving time of the food for them. And to do so, our system consists of 3 steps. First, we build up the user interface that takes what user wants and how hungry they are. Then we compute how long people have to chill based on the shaving time required for infill. We develop a user interface that lets people input their hungriness, and the system calculates the printed food accordingly. This is how our system looks like. The debugging mode only appears for the demonstration purpose, and we can just ignore it by remove it out. User input the type of meal, such as breakfast, lunch, snack, or dinner. The system will usually calculate the allowable carry and the food printing parameter. The user also input how hungry they are in percentage from 0% to 100%. The system then calculates new printing parameter accordingly. Then user click generated food. The system prepares the food model accordingly to print the parameter, then directly send the printing model to the printer via the wireless network. Once the user input their preference, we then compute the shaving time based on the perceived satiety. We convert how the user is hungry into the perceived satiety so that we can manipulate the shaving time accordingly. The question is, how can we estimate the shaving time from the perceived satiety? So, in a previous experiment, we collected the relationship between shaving times and the increasing in the satieties by using the EMT sensor and the questionnaire results. We use that data to create the computational models that determine the relationship between the infill and the perceived satieties. Here, the result from the experiment 1 is to represent the shaving times and the perceived satieties for each participants per each type of the cookies. We fit the graph with the linear regression functions to estimate the change of the infill patterns to the perceived satieties, and this regression function is used as the computational model that calculates the effective food to satisfy the satieties. Okay, so now we are knowing how long people have to chill. So the next question is, what is infill should we use to print the food? So that we have to compute the infill based on the shaving time. Let's go back to the experiment 1. Our regression models not only indicate the type of infills to use for print the food, but also the area in which each infill patterns are effects to manipulate the perceived satiety. Together with the result from the second experiment, we can estimate the infill patterns from the user's satieties, then use the estimated shaving time as the input to estimate the infill density. And here is the full pipeline system. Please see your paper for more detail. And let's talk a little bit about the limitations. In our works, we only modify the proposed method with the cookie, and also to investigate the food 3D printing is only done with the 2 parameters, infill patterns and the infill density. However, there are a lot of more parameters to explore and other type of food to investigate, such as the 3D printing sushi, and so on. Also, we can use another fabrication method, such as to cut in strip of the bacons, or using the laser meltings or laser etching. And let me conclude my talk. The food perceptions and fabrications have a lot of opportunities, not only to tackle the food intake, but also to customize the taste structure of the food improve the eating experience, or to change the waste of the food to be produced. And in other words, we really tackle the food intake issues through the modifications of the food internal structure using the food 3D printing as the infill patterns and the infill density. However, there are more opportunities to this field that we would like to investigate in the future. For example, the food 3D printing should allow the persons to share the similar food experience from the different locations, or to support the personal food in the elder care homes. And this is all of my talk. Thank you for listening.
Right, great. Thank you so much for the talk. Is there any questions from the audience? I can start for myself. I was actually wondering that the example shown in this paper seems relatively simple to tune different infill, but I think the power of 3D printing has more advanced. While I understand like the cookie baking would like mess up the detailed internal structure, I was wondering if you guys have thought of kind of like, what if you can like, for example, if you can like tune, spatially assign different density in the cookie, or tune different types of internal structure. Can you touch a little bit on that and how that could be, cool.
Right, no, that's an excellent question, Ken. And yeah, I'm just going to talk for Parinja, who's sleeping at the moment, because he's in Japan.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's a really good point, because right now we just use this very crude global infill change, right? And you could also say, oh, is that not maybe modifying, your experience of eating that piece, right? Because something that's normally softer, if you modify the infill, right, that's also going to be harder. There's been like some really interesting work on making local taste structures throughout the food to create like new types of like taste experiences. And I think our work would super awesomely piggyback on that work, by then also making these local, more crunchy areas and more soft areas, depending on the layouts. I think that's an excellent question and suggestion for the future work.
Thank you so much. No, I was also thinking like maybe you can like let users eat slower some part while some part taking longer, so they can taste more of some, I don't know, specific parts.
That's a great point as well. Yeah, that's super. Yeah,
but in general, I think it's really interesting to bridge perception study and the fabrication and specifically for this really unique 3D printing foods.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you so much. With that, I think I would like to move to the next speaker. Thank you so much again. And please virtually applause. So next speaker, okay, cool. You guys are already sharing the screen. And, and the talk title is Polysense, Augmenting Textiles with Electrical Functionality Using In-Situ Polymerization. And I believe Cedric and Paul are presenting together. So let's see how this thing works.
Do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
Great. Perfect.
Hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, hi, my name is Cedric Renet, and along with Paul Strohmeyer, we're going to present Polysense, an accessible process that makes fabric smarter. This presentation will be chronological from the original problem to the first solution, followed by a few unexpected discoveries and opportunities for the future. Let's start with the initial motivation. This project was born at Datapolet, a hackerspace collective focused on e-textiles, such as this matrix pressure sensor. This sensor uses two kinds of materials. First, let's discuss the conductive fabric. On the right, we can see horizontal stripes used to sequentially power the sensor for rasterization. On the left, we see the vertical stripes. They are connected to the analog front end of the electronic circuit, which reports the measures to a computer. In the middle, you can see a darker fabric. This is the piezoresistive material. It changes its resistance when someone presses it. This material is expensive, about $200 per square meter, and it became harder to get over time. But what is piezoresistivity anyway? We illustrate it here as a layer of free conductive particles. When they are pressed together, the overall conductance increases or the resistance decreases. So we tried to make our own coating ink with silver, copper, or carbon particles, and we were never really satisfied. We realized that we didn't really understand the material. Fortunately, I met our collaborator, Anna Batista, and I spent a week in her material science lab. And after various analyses, such as Raman spectroscopy, we understood better what could be in the reference material. And everything became much clearer. Thanks to this expertise, we found various solutions to implement the piezoresistive behavior. And then we worked hard to design a simple process that you can replicate in your kitchen. We ended up needing only two chemicals, a monomer called pyrrole and iron chloride, which is also used for PCB etching. So it's fairly common. Here, we use the magnetic stirrer to mix the textiles with the chemicals, and we tuned the process to obtain a pressure sensor in about 1 hour. Paul has a comment, I think, here.
Yeah, well, we prepared a bunch of applications, and the point of them is to give you an idea of what can be done with polymerization. But I think an important take-home of these applications is that we're not presenting something which is finished now. So we're not at the end of a process. We're kind of sharing actually the beginning of a process. And you'll notice the examples that Cedric is going to show in a moment, they're all either examples of work that we have done, since getting this paper published, or of ongoing projects that we're working on right now. So this is something that we're actively using in our research and in our design and artwork. And I think that's kind of cool. I'm really proud of that, actually.
So, as Paul said, in these applications, we did a few things. Here we augmented off-the-shelf gloves to augment 3D models, here for a virtual hand. As all of our projects, this one is on GitHub. It's available for you to play with. For the Augmented Humans conference, we showed that off-the-shelf kiniotape, or kinesiotape, they can be augmented for various on-skin interfaces, including this linear slider that we can see here. Kinesiotape is made of textile and skin-compatible glue. It can be found in most pharmacies and supermarkets. After the small embedded applications that we just saw, we might wonder, how does this process scale? Here, we can see an installation that uses several meters of functionalized fabric. It is still working perfectly after many weeks, exhibited in a museum in France, where the fabric was touched every day by visitors. So the process is reliable over time. In this other artistic application, we polymerized feathers and used them as capacitive sensors for a sonified installation. Both installations were nominated for a secret Austrian festival that you probably know. And they
were nominated for Ars Electronica.
Oh, come on, secret. And they might be exhibited there depending on the coronavirus evolution. Polysense focused on e-textiles, but we functionalized many other materials. And almost anything porous or fibrous works. Last summer, Hannah also augmented a pair of leggings. She's one of our co-authors. And she controlled her presentation slides at CCC. This is the biggest hackerspace congress in the world, about 70,000 people last winter and 5,000 last summer. Thanks to the warm conditions, we realized that our process can also make a great humidity sensors or sweat sensor. Finally, Polysense can also be used for custom actuators. As anything resistive, this polymerized glove hits when electrified, and as anything resistive, temperature affects its resistance. So we characterize the resistance variation as a function of temperature, and we observed that heating can be safely controlled with a feedback loop, thanks to the collocated sensing and actuated possibility. So you just saw a few possibilities that we deployed in various festivals and conferences. Now you might want to do your own polymerization. The paper describes the process, but let's do a step-by-step together. Firstly, we use a bit less than twice the water needed to soak all the fabric, all the material that you want to polymerize. Secondly, mix it with the monomer. Again, it's pyrrole. Then soak the fabric and mix it for about 10 minutes. Finally, add the oxidizing agent. Again, it's iron chloride. That's what triggers the in situ polymerization. For piezoresistive sensors, keep mixing for about half an hour. And for capacitive sensors, about 2 hours. A longer polymerization improves the conductance, but synthetic materials may need a bit more time in general. So polymers are just chains of monomers. But why is this particular polymerization called in situ? Well, because we first soak the fabric with the monomer, and then we trigger the polymerization. So each fiber gets merged with the chains that are formed in place. In a way, we can see it a bit like a molecular level dyeing process. So this polymerization mostly creates chains of carbon. It explains why the results are so dark, but it also explains the electrical conductivity. We characterized this conductance, and Paul will discuss it now.
Okay, just give me a second to share my screen. So on some level, what we're doing is so much more versatile than anything you can get commercially that we didn't really care specifically, is our material a better pressure sensor, or how it compares to existing things. But still, we thought that you guys would be curious how it does compare. So here's some examples. And it should also be noted that depending on which fabric you're using to polymerize, the results vary greatly. And as Cedric was saying, time is also a factor in how the final results look. But in this graphs, on the x-axis, you see 3 finger presses. So for each of these fabrics, we press it with a finger 3 times, and we recorded the force. And then we recorded the corresponding resistance. And we also plotted these against each other. And you can see that all of them, the commercial one and ours, they all have quite some hysteresis. Some of ours have more hysteresis, or appear to have more hysteresis than the commercial material. But they're more or less similar in how they behave. But the interesting part is, which we were quite happy with, that the dynamic range that we can achieve is typically higher than those of commercial materials that we could buy. But having said that, that's not really the cool part about this process. That's not why it's so interesting. So let me talk about design methods, because in a way, talking about these large pieces of fabric is like saying, you know, copper is really great for electronics, which it is, but it is once you give it structure. So without structure, well, there's not really much you can do with it. And we looked at methods inspired kind of by traditional craft of working with fabric. So one of these processes is shibori, or more commonly known, well, it's originally called shibori in Japan, and today we know it as tie-dyeing. And you can create all kinds of patterns. People get really creative with this. One of the interesting things about tie-dyeing is, well, you can create repetitive patterns, but you can also create gradients. So the sample on the right-hand side, it was rolled up before it was tied and dyed. And the layers that are furthest down have the highest resistance. So going from top to bottom, M2 to M3 to M4, the resistance decreases as you go to the outside of the wrap that we made. Now, in the clip that I showed before, we weren't only tie-dyeing fabric, we were also tie-dyeing thread. And the reason why this is interesting is you can create a pattern in thread, and then you can weave it. And if you design it correctly, you can have the weave have, you know, the specific shapes that you intended it to have. We didn't explore this very far, but we have friends in Berlin, Studio Hilo, who are creating devices that create custom thread, and they have software for creating custom patterns out of their custom thread. And we think that's a super interesting way to explore for pushing e-textiles further. And then the method we actually use the most is from Indonesia. It's called batik. And here you basically use hot wax to create a wax resist. You put wax everywhere where you don't want the polymerization process to happen. And again, this is a method that can create all kinds of patterns. In this example, we kind of played with this idea of creating resistors where we want them. And we kind of looked at, you see there's two large areas connected through small channels. And you see that if you measure resistance between two areas with which are connected through a thick area, it's orders of magnitude less resistance than if the electricity has to kind of find its way through the small channels we created here. So basically we can create resistors of the resistance that we want by doing the design well. And we also use batik to, well, to take a functional fabric, an off-the-shelf fabric, and basically treat it like a PCB, add a wax layer and etch away everything where it should not conduct. The reason this is super interesting is you can create a fabric with some kind of conductive, highly conductive pattern, and then you can polymerize that. And this kind of allows you to implement a full circuit in fabric. So this is a sample we made. The idea was kind of to have this be like kind of a fabric game controller of sorts. I just wanted a bunch of input methods and a piece of fabric. And in the middle, you see a vertical and horizontal black stripe. You could think of these as a differential stretch sensor. So if you can imagine the way I have laid it out here, if you stretch it horizontally, the resistance that, or the voltage you measure at the analog input that I indicated in white would drop. And if you stretch it the other way, the voltage would increase. And I thought that you would also kind of like wrap up the edges and then have two pressure sensors. So here we're kind of back in this layered design that we've seen a lot of, but you can measure the resistance from A to B through the piezoresistive material in C. So these are just ways of kind of implementing a lot of things which usually would be circuitry directly into the fabric. And this is where the real promise of the methods we're showing in this paper lies. So before I conclude, I just kind of want to touch on some high-level points which we thought were important. And the first, I'm kind of quoting Cedric here. He kept saying this throughout the project. We need to visit our neighbors. And basically, if you look at the authors, we all have very different backgrounds, contexts, ways of working and thinking, and none of us alone would have come up with this. And combining knowledge and approaches from different domains really allowed us to push the boundaries of this project. It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it. The other idea, and I'm stealing this from Make, if you can't open it, you don't own it. And even more, if your intention is to design a product and you don't understand parts of the materials you're using, you don't really have a product. You're dependent on suppliers who are hiding critical information from you. So let's say the supplier doesn't supply the material anymore, or they change the formula and it doesn't work anymore. You go to a new supplier and say, hey, can you build this for me? And they say, yeah, sure, just tell us the formula to use. You're not in a good place. That was the problem we were originally addressing. But in working with our process, we realized that there's something much more profound happening here. And I'm quoting Irene Posch here, who had this beautiful slide at TI a couple of years ago saying tools are not neutral. The same is true for materials. So the material, the piezoresistive material that many of us know, this fixed felt-like material, it inspires a certain way of using it. So the original matrix design that Cedric showed at the very beginning is a very typical design. You will see variations of this a lot, of kind of layering this felt material in between two conductive materials. And in this way, the material you're working with shapes the outcome. And by providing a generic process, our designs are no longer constrained in that way. We can really freely reflect on them. And this is reflected in the diversity of the examples that Cedric showed at the beginning. And to me, that's kind of the really strong point of this project. Finally, what you see in the middle here, and I'm quoting Hannah, our co-author, that's her version of the open hardware logo. It symbolizes a fruit, and in it has seeds. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to not only share the fruit, but we're sharing the fruit with its seeds. Before I conclude, I'd like to thank Anna Baptista, Hannah Perner-Wilson, Marc Tessier, Bruno Frouchard, and Jürgen Steimle for our collaborators on this project. Cedric and I want to thank them. And with that, I conclude our presentation, and I'd be happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul and Cedric. I think unfortunately we are running out of time, but it was amazing. I actually wanted to ask questions about like different form factor, about the feather and stuff. So hope we can like continue chatting or discussing through chat or Twitter. So for audiences, please don't hesitate to reach out to the authors or ask questions on the.
And we have a ton of materials on counterchemists.github.io.
Yeah.
I'm just sharing with you
cool
guys.
that you're sharing that. So thank you so much.
And please get back to us with questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to do the virtual applause or physical, whatever it was. Okay, thanks so much. So that was the fabrication session we just finished now. And I would like to thank again for all the presenters. And we are actually moving to the last session of CambridgeCHI, which I'm continuing to be the chair because this is pretty much a lightning talk. Each of talk, we have 8 papers from non-paper track set program, which is basically from late breaking work, case studies, and I think there's one from student competition. So I will be playing video. I think like most of them have submitted a pre-recorded video. So I would like to stream one after another. And yeah, so but yeah, if you have any comments, I think most of the authors are participating in the channel or the Zoom room. So please give feedback, comments, questions on the Zoom chat if you have any. So let's go with the first talk. Pat, who actually just sent me this video right now because his live connection was not that good. But so Pat from MIT Media Lab, he's presenting a wearable wisdom. Oh wait, I'm not screen sharing. One moment. Let me do a screen share. Okay, can you turn off the video? Yeah. Cool. So let me play the video.
I'm from the MIT Media Lab. Today, I would like to present the paper on wearable wisdom, a context-aware audio-based system for mediating wisdom from personal mentors to the users. I'm part of the Fluid Interfaces group at the Media Lab, where we are interested in the idea of human augmentation across scale, application, and platform. And today, the work that we are presenting is focusing on the use of wisdom from mentors and personal heroes to augment user motivation and inspiration. We are living in the age of voice AI interface, where we have personal robot and voice assistant everywhere helping us with all kinds of things, from personal tasks to work-related tasks. One of the questions that we ask is, what else can this voice interface do for us beyond giving us information? Can they help us with something that is very important, like motivation and inspiration? We're inspired by the idea of whisper, where in the future an AI system might be able to whisper something very intimate or insightful to us. And prior work have already explored this area, looking at the way that we can create a computational system that serves as our mentor, providing them with their attitude on things that we are interested in. Research in psychology have shown that having good mentors and role models is important for personal growth. Empirical research from psychology has shown that having insight from a role model or a mentor can positively affect the performance and progression of a person's career, increase motivation, change goals, and reduce stereotype threat. However, as we've seen in many science fiction movies, the mentors and the gurus are not always there when we need them the most. So what we decide to create is a prototype of a wearable device that can give the person wisdom in the time that they need them, using an AI system that look at the database of mentor wisdom. We collaborate with Bose to use their audio augmented reality glasses that contain accelerometer, microphone sensor, and connected with the smartphone application that we develop. And by doing this, we can get the context of the user when they are doing different activity and be able to deliver something relevant to the context. I can't seem to finish this. What would Einstein do? Hey Einstein, how can I be as smart as you?
It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer.
Wow, that's cool. Thank you.
Do or do not. There is no try.
You can see from the example that the user were interacting with the wearable wisdom system by asking specific question to the mentor, or by receiving the proactive wisdom when he or she was doing the task, specific task. And here, this is the technical overview of the wearable wisdom system, where we have the audio augmented reality glasses that can sense the context of the user, connected with the mobile application that we develop. With this mobile application, the user can select the mentor that he or she want to get the feedback from, and the software will be able to kind of pull the most relevant wisdom from the mentor database that we collect prior to the system. And this computation happen in the cloud with semantic computation, where we give the AI an understanding of a semantic similarity between the context and the question that the user was asking with the things inside the wisdom database. And here, these are example of the response that the AI system picked as part of the question. For example, if we ask, how can I become more creative? These are the response that Einstein, Marie Curie, Picasso, and Steve Jobs have said in the past, and the AI picked this response because they have semantically similarity to the question. And this is based on the hypothesis that if the wisdom were to match the question, there should be a similar semantic coherence between these two sentences. And you see that by changing the question or changing the mentor, you'll be able to get different perspective on the thing that you want the feedback on. We perform a preliminary user study trying to understand if the wisdom matching algorithm can perform better than control when we give the user the feedback. And in the control, we randomly select the wisdom from the same mentor, but without knowing the context or the question that the user were asking. And we see that there's a significant increase when we use the semantic matching algorithm in terms of the relevancy between the question and the answer that the user received, and also in terms of inspiration as well. We envision that this work will opening up possibility of using AI to bounce idea with, giving multi-perspective on demand, or be able to provide a proactive inspiration and motivation for behavioral change as the user can engage with the voice AI assistant when they're doing certain tasks, and be able to get inspirational wisdom from the mentor. And finally, as we are moving in this digital age, we think that we can use an AI system to connect the individual with the mentor that is from the same cultural heritage as they are, and be able to use this to facilitate the sharing of wisdom across generation, culture, and beyond. And this work we're continuing this work. Is a work in progress, and we hope to get more feedback on the project. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone.
Cool, thank you, Pat. Really like the video, enjoy the video. I think I will leave my video off because I need to play next video. To see, but the next video or the lightning talk is from the late breaking work. Let's see if I can open this video. Oh, there's an issue I'm experiencing. Oh, I just need to say open. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So the next talk is, the title is Breakbeat Narratives, a personalized conversational interactive storytelling system for museum education. And I believe Daniela is going to present this work in the video. So let's play.
We introduced the Breakbeat Narratives, a novel interactive narrative exhibit supporting general public learning about hip-hop culture and history. This project was researched and developed at the MIT Center for Advanced Virtuality, directed by Professor Fox Harrell. We acknowledge the support of our project collaborators, the Universal Hip Hop Museum of the Bronx, Microsoft, John Jennings and Stacy Robinson of Black Kirby, and TunesMap Educational Foundation. The Universal Hip Hop Museum is the first of its kind to provide distinctive educational and entertainment experiences about local and global hip hop. The Breakbeat Narratives is the centerpiece installation of the Revolution of Hip Hop exhibit, offering visitors a customized examination of hip hop history driven by Microsoft technology. Through this and many other types of installations, the Revolution of Hip Hop exhibit provides visitors with a sneak preview of the Universal Hip Hop Museum, which is scheduled to open in 2023. Breakbeat Narratives provides exhibit visitors with an immersive, story-based journey through hip-hop history and culture from the 1970s through the present. By collecting and processing information about visitors' music and lyrical preferences, the system enables a personalized learning experience by presenting audio and multimedia content curated to fit their specific interests. Breakbeat Narratives was publicly launched as the central display at the Revolution of Hip Hop at New York's Bronx Terminal Market in December of 2019. The exhibit, which is free to the public, attracted over 3,500 visitors within the first 10 days of its launch, with visitors of all ages traveling from Australia, London, France, Sweden, Brazil, China, Japan, and Israel. We will now show a brief video highlighting key functionality of the system. Upon app launch, the user is presented with a chatbot-style interface guided by 5 novel characters called the Elementals, named after the 5 elements of hip-hop culture: emceeing, DJing, graffiti art, breakdancing, and knowledge. The Elementals prompt the user to provide input indicating their preferences regarding musical genres and lyrics from hip-hop songs. This input determines which of the 11 narratives and 55 custom audio playlists will be presented to the user. For instance, if our user modeling revealed a mellow musical preference and an interest in social issues, they would receive a narrative with a soundtrack of 5 songs, all featuring both that style and theme. For example, songs featuring smooth and relaxing styles that also address critical topics in hip-hop. Following the user's completion of the narrative experience, they are presented with a QR code that they can scan with their mobile device to enable a more in-depth listening of a virtual mixtape following their visit to the exhibit. Feedback collected from users following the experience via JSON logs, survey data, and museum staff interviews will be used to determine what impact, if any, personalization using our novel identity model has on visitor engagement, satisfaction, and learning. For more information, you can read our CHI 2020 late-breaking work or visit virtuality.mit.edu.
Cool, thank you so much for the talk. There's a question about you can access online. Please access this URL, or the author also sent a URL here, so thank you. Okay, so the next talk is by Irmandi from MIT Media Lab. The title is Sensor Nets Towards Reconfigurable, Multifunctional, Fine-Grained, Soft, and Stretchable Electronic Skins. So let's watch this video.
Hello, everyone. I'm Irmandi Wicaksono from the Responsive Environments Group at the Media Lab. In this opportunity, I would like to present our work, which is Sensor Nets Towards Reconfigurable, Multifunctional, Fine-Grained, Soft, and Stretchable Electronic Skins. The human skin, as you can see here, demonstrates a large coverage and fine-grained sensing system. It incorporates multiple sensing modalities into one dense soft substrate, including temperature, pain, touch, vibration, pressure, and stretch. In addition to this sensing capability, it also serves mediator functions, such as for radiation and pathogen protection, thermal regulation, as well as waterproofing. In the last 2 decades, there has been a significant effort conducted in developing skin-inspired stretchable electronics. Most of these soft electronic approaches, however, require sophisticated machinery, materials, and specialized fabrication process. Their connections also tend to be centralized and multiplex, with a large amount of wirings, and this really restrains them from large-scale, dense, and scalable deployment. Our previous work in responsive environments demonstrated the concept of dense, large area, peer-to-peer sensor networks that we call sensate media. Some notable examples, as can be seen here, are the tessellated spherical tribal, the rigid pressure-sensitive Z-tiles, chainmail with its rigid printed circuit board array and flex connections, FluoreSense, an inkjet printed conductive ink on papers for scalable fluorescence sensing applications, and sensor tape, a long array of sensor networks on a flex PCB. However, none of this work is soft, malleable, or stretchable, which motivate our work here in developing sensor nets. Sensor nets consist of a flex PCB island as sensor nodes connected to each other with stretchable interconnects. Each node consists of a microprocessor that communicates with a collection of sensors and a light-emitting diode, and this is in a two-dimensional format. The system is composed of multiple sensor nodes with its own processor that talk to a central system, similar to how our sensory receptors in our skin communicate with the brain cortex through spinal cord. These nodes, acting as slaves, they talk to the master and can also talk to each other through 4-wire I2C protocol. Here we show the characterization results of each sensing modality. As we tap each node, the accelerometer data responds correspondingly, as can be seen in this graph. From the combination of gyroscope and accelerometer data, we can also detect folding, calculate folding angle, as well as the folding direction. It is also possible to detect and localize stretch events, as well as analyzing its direction. This is possible by analyzing the data of the gyroscope and accelerometer in between every 2 nodes. Since the IMU has an inbuilt magnetometer, we can also perform proxemic sensing to detect strength of magnetic field and localized magnetic approach. In addition, the encapsulated barometer on every node also enables us to perform tactile sensing. Lastly, we also have temperature and humidity sensor on every node. As a preliminary applications, we show the ability of each sensor node to calculate its positions relative to its peers, and this is to sense shape and deformation. With augmented reality and blob LED detection, we demonstrate a new way to localize and visualize 2D sensor network array data. Future applications will also include gaming, where this electronic skin can be used as a tangible controller, while also relaying sensor data and animation digitally to communication with a AR headset or a mobile phone camera, for example. The future development of sensor nets will focus on several aspects, and this can be classified into 3 main categories: the materials, the hardware, and the application side. In the end, we hope to demonstrate a new interaction and ubiquitous computing paradigm enabled by this 2D large area soft electronic skin. That's the end of my talk. Thank you for listening. If you have any question or feedback, please contact me here and refer to our project page.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mandy. Very creative work. And I'm sure there's lots of questions. For example, I wonder how this can be scalable and stuff, but please contact authors or post on the Zoom chat. I would like to move to the next talk. Okay, next talk is by Sunny Tian from MIT CSO. The title is Integrating Discussion and Summarization in Collaborative Writing.
Suppose your college's student body wants to improve the dining options on campus. The students turn to a forum to discuss ideas, but eventually there are too many comments to keep up. How can the student body reach a consensus on this mountain of ideas and combine them into a cohesive proposal? Today, it is too easy for online discussions to grow out of hand with the current tools we use. Existing solutions, such as filtering, voting, or moderation, can suppress minority ideas or reveal biases. Also, there's no way to synthesize the ideas, so users have to move to a separate document writing software, meaning that users can't refer to the conversation in their document. That's where Wickham comes in. Wickham is a project that provides a new way to create something meaningful from discussion by integrating discussion and synthesis. Originally, Wickham was built for static discussions to be imported and then summarized. But conversations might not stop there. So I built on top of this tool to create Wickham Plus, which allows groups to comment and summarize interchangeably in a synchronous way, growing and shrinking the content. Here's an example workflow. Users start off discussing, shown here in blue, representing comments in an unsummarized state. Once users are done discussing an idea, they can summarize that thread, creating a summary, shown in orange. Now the comments underneath are yellow, showing that they've been summarized. Here's what it looks like in wickham.org. You can see here the comments underneath are yellow. We continue to recursively summarize the entire conversation. Now, when a new reader comes in, they see the summary first, but it can be expanded to see the original comments underneath. If the discussion gives them a new thought, they can leave a new comment under the summary. The summary icon updates to show that it now needs to be updated to incorporate the new comments. Someone can update the summary to include the new thought, returning the summary to orange. I conducted a user study where college students write a proposal to improve campus dining options. One group used Wickham and the other control group used Google Docs and a messaging app. The study had a synchronous in-person 30-minute portion followed by an asynchronous remote portion over 3 days. In the asynchronous portion, we found that Wickham users could easily find new blue comments and partial summaries to work on. This meant multiple rounds of discussion and summarization. In contrast, after the synchronous portion, the control group couldn't figure out what was newly added, so the only changes they made were clarifying and grammatical fixes, leaving the content mostly unchanged. Wickham also provided more organization because the synthesizing occurred incrementally. They made use of Wickham features such as tags to group similar comments and flagging of incomplete summaries. On the other hand, a control group user explained that having two platforms diluted the information and made it confusing. Wickham users also found that the process was more inclusive of everyone's ideas because unlike the control group, they always first discuss all ideas.
So it's just
This pilot study suggests that Wickham Plus helps promote inclusiveness, organization, and lightweight coordination compared to a control. You can try out Wickham at wickham.org. Thanks for listening.
Cool, thank you so much. There's a chat comment from the Zoom chat that this was a student research competition paper for undergrad track, and this won the competition. So congrats for Amy, and please read the paper for detail. Congratulations. Next paper is by Shaun, and the title is Accelerating Adult Readers with Typeface, a study of individual preferences and effectiveness. And Shaun is from Brown University, so let's play this video.
Hello, my name is Sean Wallace, and I want to thank you for watching our pre-recorded video for our short paper on accelerating adult readers with typeface. In this work, we are interested not only in what is your most preferred font to read in, but also what is your most effective font to read in for general everyday reading. We want to study if personalized reading experiences can augment reading behavior in individuals. Could users' preference predict their effectiveness in terms of reading speed and comprehension? Could we develop a test for users that gives them their most preferred font and a definitive ranking of all of their font choices? In addition, would users believe this final font recommendation? Do they believe they would read faster in it or comprehend the material better? If we want to study preference, how do we quantify it? In the past, researchers used pairwise comparisons using 2 physical monitors. In more recent studies, users would indicate their preference for a font using a Likert scale, or they would provide a ranking for 4 or less fonts. The difference between our study and the more recent studies is that we use double elimination tournaments for users to find their most preferred font out of 16 possible font choices. A double elimination tournament also allows us to definitively rank these 16 fonts per user. Building on prior work, we also use a font toggle test, but we do not use 2 physical monitors. Instead, we use this basic interface that is fixed across all devices that allows users to toggle between a single paragraph and 2 different font families. After users have seen each font, they can select which one they prefer. By doing a double elimination tournament, this limits the number of pairwise comparisons a user has to make. Pairwise comparisons allows us to quantify people's preference using individuated metrics. Our study featured 63 participants in total, recruited from a variety of sources. Our guiding questions were, which were highly rated fonts, what factors influence font preference, and do people have similar preferences? Our study alternated between preference and effectiveness tests. In the effectiveness test, participants read passages in a fixed font, which was either a random font or their most preferred font. We only captured reading speed within 100 to 650 words per minute. This allowed us to remove users who were either skimming or reading for memorization. In a post-survey, participants generally described their preferred font as bold and modern, with natural character spacing, and not causing eye strain. However, most importantly, these qualitative preferences were not consistent. Some users even preferred smaller fonts, so they could read more in one sitting. Our first main takeaway is that preference is indeed personal. Across our 16 font choices, 15 of them were preferred by at least one participant. In terms of pairwise comparisons, Noto Sans had the highest win percentage. Ironically, Open Sans, which is aesthetically similar, was at 57%. Noto Sans also performed well in ELO rating, as well as Open Sans and Montserrat. Now, disagreement is the standard deviation amongst ELO ratings across users. This helps explain why Garamond, despite being the most preferred font amongst 8 participants, had low ELO ratings and low win percentage. We found that font preference did not predict effectiveness. In our study, despite 80% of participants believing their most preferred font would be their most effective font to read in, this is only true at random. In general, people did not read faster or slower in their most preferred font. 2 additional findings we had were that 92% of participants believed the font recommendation given to them at the end of the double elimination tournament. In addition, we found that familiarity did not predict effectiveness. Participants in our study read 51% faster in their fastest font compared to their slowest font, while retaining high levels of reading comprehension. This is equivalent to an additional 10 pages per hour. Given these gains in our findings that different fonts are effective for different people, there's an exciting opportunity to build custom reading experiences and augment reading performance for adult readers. Our findings highlight the potential impacts on individual reading efficiency and point to a future where machines help adult readers to reach their full potential. Thank you for watching our pre-recorded talk. If you would like to take the tests featured in this study, please visit readabilitytest.org. And thank you to all of the groups who helped collaborate on this work. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at seanwallace@brown.edu. Thank you and be well.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. There's a link people can try this thing, so I encourage audiences to check this. I think the next talk is in live. Jack, are you around? He hasn't responded. Okay,
I
cool.
can share my screen.
Okay, so go ahead and please, 5 minutes.
All right.
Let me introduce while you are preparing. So the title of this paper is Hydrogel Textile Composites Actuators for Shape-Changing Interfaces. So Jack Foreman from MIT is presenting. Go ahead.
Yes. All right. And let me just make sure my computer sound is shared. Okay. Great. Hello, everyone.
Jack,
oh,
I'm
yeah.
seeing that, presenter screen.
Sorry, I'm set up with my other desktop. Sorry, I'm disconnecting from my main desktop because it's projecting to that screen. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jack Foreman. And I'm currently a student at the MIT Media Lab, but this work took place when I was at Carnegie Mellon University. The work is hydrogel textile composites, actuators for shape-changing interfaces. And I did this work with my co-author, Michael Rivera, also with our PIs, Scott Hudson and Lin Yao, as kind of a collaboration between the Morphing Matter Lab and the Dev Lab. So I'm going to show quickly a video, and I'm going to talk about some of the results that we found in our work. So in this work, we printed hydrogels onto textiles. They're safe, edible even hydrogels that can be printed with a close to off-the-shelf 3D printer, just using a standard Bowden type extruder. And so these are moisture responsive fabrics because hydrogels swell. Hydrogels are just like Jello, or yeah, Jello is a great way to put it. And so in this application, it's almost a weather indicator that depending on the moisture can morph in response to it. So we actually tested a variety of materials, and I'll kind of talk about the impact of that further going forward. So very quickly, I want to talk about, again, the printing process. What we're doing is we're taking a jello material, kappa carrageenan, and we're mixing it with cold water where it doesn't dissolve. But as it goes through the hot end, the tip of this 3D printer, it actually dissolves the gel and it turns it into a liquid. So it's hot, so it's still liquid, but once it cools, it sets into a gel. So this is also a in situ polymerization process, but it uses heat as the as what triggers the phase change. And so what we found when we were printing on fabrics is that the grain, so woven fabrics have different grains to them. So there's straight grain, cross grain, and then on the bias, which is kind of the diagonal. And so the straight grain, when we're printing along the straight grain, we don't get much morphing as opposed to when we print along the bias, because the bias is inherently more flexible, but so it owes itself better to morphing. I think the thinner and more flexible something can be, generally the better it is. We also found that the shape of the initial fabric, unsurprisingly, I guess, affects the morphing form. The triangle, it's almost like as the fabric gets smaller, we also find that the morphing increases because there's just less weight of the fabric. We also found that the morphing pattern affects, the print pattern affects the morphing behavior. So going from more evenly curling on all edges to more of a cone shape or curling in on the edges. Finally, we found that the material that we use, and this was kind of a big part, but the material affects the morphing extent and again, the form. So generally, the thinner and smaller our substrate could be, the better it was at morphing. Also, something like felt was nice for kind of a uniform shrinkage or morphing. But we found that things like cotton that already have some kind of internal structure to them actually curled more dramatically, which we think is because the structure kind of suggests a morphing path for it to go on. And also these woven and particularly woven textiles are a lot thinner than something like a felt generally. So overall, the design space of our work, we can vary the hydrogel concentration and pattern. that we're printing with. So a lower hydrogel will, I hear a buzzer going off. So I'm going to wrap up, but we can change the hydrogel concentration to affect the morphing type, also the textile that we use and the amount of hydration. Conclusion, we present an electricity-free, human-safe, accessible to produce technique for producing morphing textiles. And in future work, we're interested in using smart hydrogels, also looking at the moisture sensing characteristics of hydrogels for just embedded sensors, and finally creating full responsive garments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Cool project. I see lots of interesting future directions. So I again suggest the audience to take a look at the paper and give any comments to Jack. Thank you. Okay, let me take over the share screen now. So the next talk is not the one you're seeing now, but it's this one. It's from Kiosk. The paper is titled Kiosk, Practice Study of Load Sensitive Board for Farmers Market. And Koichi is going to present with the pre-recorded video. So let's watch this video together.
Hi everyone, I'm Koichi Yoshino from Topan Printing, Tokyo. First of all, I'd like to say thank the organizers. I'm happy to give this presentation here. Today I want to present our case studies paper, Kiosk, Practice Study of Load Sensitive Board for Farmers Market. Nowadays, ICT has created new retail technology solutions, especially smart shelves based on tracking technology are changing UX in the retail store. However, installing these emerging systems is limited in very few stores due to their complex system configuration. These smart shelf systems should be more simple and portable enough to be implemented into every store, including farmers markets and pop-up stores. This study was proceeded along with an iterative design process. As a first step, we came up with how our modular load-based sensor system scale could be used so as to realize a simple smart shelf. As you can see in this video, this scale has an object tracking function. With this function, we try to prototype and evaluate the possibility repeatedly in the lab. Then we decided to move forward field study step. Toward field studies, we set research questions. First, what is the detection accuracy and speed? Second, how can the system benefit from shopping UX in the farmers market? To narrow the UX down, we conducted interviews with farmers market sellers, and then we compiled their needs, as you can see in this slide. The first field study aims to check the performance and the shopping flow. We designed a system configuration like this. The field study was conducted at a company internal pop-up store. We sold 4 items and managed them with bulk selling form. The number of participants is 20. We got the data from log, observation, and interviews. After improving our detection algorithm and system configuration, including a large LCD device instead of small tablet PCs, we conducted the second field study. This study aims to evaluate the performance and UX in real farmers market store in Tokyo. We sold 3 vegetable items and managed them with bulk selling form. As you can see in this video, shoppers can get information about the item which they picked up via a large screen in real time. This chart shows the results and findings from the field studies. Regarding the detection of the accuracy and the difference ground error, although we've raised the accuracy through the field studies, the result is not satisfactory to us, because we aim each target values become 98% and 2%. The inaccuracy of mostly caused by windy weather conditions at that time. In addition to that, regarding the findings from observation and interviews, in the first field study, there are some interaction design issues, like it's not easy for shoppers to see information in tablet PCs, and seller's system instruction paralyzes shoppers' natural flow. In the second field study, these issues are improved. Moreover, we found that conversations are stimulated by sharing item information. Finally, I'd like to discuss the possibility of kiosk. As I mentioned before, the current kiosk doesn't have enough accuracy to work well in actual stores. To improve it, we should develop a specialized load sensor module for smart shelf, instead of using a versatile sensitive load sensor toolkit scale. One characteristic of farmers market is shoppers can enjoy their shopping with communicating with sellers who are producers. However, not all producers are good sellers. Kiosk allows producers to make it easier to selling and support starting their in-store conversation. The item transaction data could help sellers estimate shoppers' interest and estimate amount of shipping items. The simple in-store marketing is not easily brought excepting load sensing approach. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Koichi. It's an interesting project that deploys technical research into the actual field, as a case study paper. Okay, I think we have the last talk. Valentina, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi,
Cool,
Ken.
cool. Let me introduce your paper title while you are preparing the share screen. Where did it go? So the paper title is, I believe, Space Human, a soft robotic prosthetic for space exploration. And Valentina from MIT Media Lab, again, is going to present. So I'll leave it to you.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Valentina Sumini. I'm a researcher in Responsive Environments Research Group and Space Exploration Initiative. And I'm presenting on behalf of the whole team that is composed of Manuel Mucillo, Jamie Milliken, Ariel Ekblau, and Joseph Paradiso. Our project relies on the sake of becoming one day multiplanetary species. So our main goal would be space travelers and democratizing the access to space. And therefore we're focusing on how we can enhance and help humans in traveling in microgravity or reduced gravity on Mars or the Moon or in low Earth orbit. And therefore we start envisioning which could be the future space travelers. And we analyze personas like an astronaut, space tourist, space colonist, and in the future might be able to explore, and even if they are not astronauts and they don't have a proper astronaut training. And therefore, looking at inspiration, we were looking with interest to the undersea world, especially we were looking with interest to seahorses, because seahorses navigate the ocean, not just swimming, but thanks to their tail, they are able to orient themselves, grab objects, and they are able to swim in upward position. And for us, this was very inspirational because in our project, we tried to develop a prosthetic, so like a human body extension that was able to perform same as the seahorse tail. And we were looking with interest with this paper published in Science that were actually analyzing in very in detail all the components that made the seahorse tail so special and so interesting for us. And we tried to analyze in detail the way we could actually explore the same performances by looking at soft robotics, because in microgravity is very easy to get hurt because it's bouncing everywhere. And so therefore we were looking to a soft robotic solution, and looking at previous soft robotics project developed by MIT teams, we were like considering how we can design a tail using mainly these air chambers composed with ribbed tubes of silicon. And for doing this project, we of course did a computational model that were able to help us in defining the performance. We analyzed the airflow going through this air chamber. We tested in the experimental platform, and we prototyped. And the prototyping aspect was very interesting because we choose, as I say before, like silicon as main materials. And we were like designing a reinforcement rib inside each air chamber in order to control the curvature. And therefore we cover the overall day structure with a customized sleeve that is machine knitted. And inside we put sensors in order to understand the behavior of the tail. And how to understand the behavior of the tail in microgravity? Well, thanks to the Space Exploration Initiative, we were able to try on a zero-G flight. And so we flew last August, and it was a wonderful experience. And here you can see the tail performance during the flight. As you can see, the tail change curvature, and while changing curvature creates angular momentum and change my orientation. And it's interesting because before the flight, we set a series of combinations that these air pumps had to perform in order to achieve different curvature during the flight. And as each parabola is very short, it's like 20 seconds. And so we had to, prior to flight, control the timing for the inflation, because you need 10 seconds for inflating and 10 seconds for deflating, and so that you are not in a dangerous situation. And here are some results of the flight. So here we have the G level. So we experience one Martian parabola. So we simulate the Martian gravity, then we simulate twice the lunar gravity, and then we have 17 parabolas of zero-G gravities. And for each parabola, we were able to extract the data and curvature information of the tail thanks to the sensors that we inserted inside the machine knitted sleeve. And I also use a device, an E4 empathic device, in order to be able to monitor my biodata and understand which was my stress level during the flight, being a non-expert user. And as a concluding remark, actually our project would like to evolve as a line of wearable soft robotic prosthetics, and we hope that could be useful for astronauts who go in extravehicular activity and spacewalk, and that up to now they're working with an active body restraint tether, that is a rigid tether that attach them to the International Space Station, but it's a passive system. So we're looking forward that space human could be very helpful in being an active system. And we are working now to add an object tracking camera in order to be able to grab in a smart way the target we want to grab. And of course, Space Human will also try to contribute along with the vision of democratizing access to space and enhance space tourism for all of us and be able to become space travelers in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. Such an cool to see research related to space in CHI. So that might, yeah, that could be a new trend in upcoming CHI. Thank you so much. All right. Let me play some. This is a closing of the CambridgeCHI. So we have finished all the talk, all the 6 sessions. So I would like to thank everyone for participating. You can express that in any way you want, appearing in video or I don't know, waving or clapping. Oh yeah, I see lots of faces. Let me disable the screen share actually, so I think people can see the face. So okay, but thank you so much for joining. For those who presented, for those who have did the session chairs to support, and for those who have done the chair for each thing. I forgot to mention that the session you just saw was actually planned by the participants of the interactivity sessions, mainly from the Media Lab. I also like to thank the registration chair, which is badly misspelled, but you know what I mean. I also would like to thank my roommate, who is right behind me, Liam. So we are streaming together from our house, and other contributors. Of course, the session chairs. Thank you so much for stitching together, organizing together, and maybe the other organizers can say something. I don't know if there's something you guys want to say.
Can you pause the music?
Okay, sorry. Was it too loud?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, I guess I would just say, actually, this is Soya's, or I'll just say that, I think, like I said in the beginning, it's our communities are very close to each other here in Cambridge, and that and yet we often don't know exactly what's going on in the building next door or 2 T stops down, and we find out kind of surprised at CHI, like, oh, you're working on that? Like, I wish I'd known. So I think while I wish we could have all been together in Hawaii, I think that the opportunity to see the papers and the work that we were doing when we wouldn't, even if we went to CHI, we wouldn't necessarily be in those sessions, right?
Yep.
I think that this is a really great tradition, and I hope that we can continue this in following years, whether it's the week before an actual CHI, virtual or in person, and just make sure that we don't miss the people right next to us.
Totally makes sense. Thank you. Soya, do you have any remarks?
I agree with Elena, and yeah, it's good to gather even if it's in the middle of this pandemic, and good to see everyone's work and faces.
Thank you. I see lots of great comments on the Zoom chat, which I think I'm going to archive this too, but thank you so much, everyone. Okay, I think last thing to say, one simple thing is to just see you. I think thanks again, and I'll hope to see you in CHI 2021. That's the usual way the conference should end, so that's what I'm showing. Next year is in Yokohama, Japan. The paper deadline is on, abstract deadline is on September 10th, and
17th.
17th is the actual paper deadline. I've heard there is some modification in the submission format this year, so I won't really go over this now, but hope you guys can see that then. See each other there. But I mean, yeah, as Elena said, we are close to each other, so once we can go back to the lab, hope to somehow gather or meet or just going for lunch, or I don't know. Just wishing everything will go back normal, and hopefully we see you in physical, either in CHI or in just Cambridge in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ken. A round of applause for Ken, please.
All right, I'll just play some Hawaiian music and end the live stream. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.